seagulls follow trawler. It's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much.
Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that? Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that? Don't back down, double down. Don't back down, double down.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time again. It is the Bustalgia experience. We are back. The tournament era is over. It's been a lively summer. We've had a good time looking back at old World Cups and Euros, but it is time to get into our bread and butter, talking about what we love the most, Glasgow Celtic. In this time machine travelling bus, we're going to be going back to multiple different eras, different seasons, looking at different players during the Celtic years Bustalgia. So tonight we're starting with a bang though. It's the 2007-2008 season, Gordon Strachan's third season, the first season that I had my season ticket. It's got probably the most memorable title run-in, I think, definitely in Celtic's recent history. So it's a pleasure tonight because I don't time travel alone. I've been joined by multiple guests. We've had a few changes in the advertised lineup. You know, schedule is always could always change. But tonight I'm joined by, first of all, Jonathan Boyce. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Phil. I'm really looking forward to this, mate. I've been following the Bustalgia religiously over the summer. I thought it's been a top quality show. I'm pretty happy to now actually be a part of the Celtic years and buzzing to get cracking into the 07-08 season when I was actually back at high school. So it'll re-jog a few old memories, I think, for me this one tonight.
Oh, it should do. Going through, putting all the notes together, I was like, God, remember all these different things happening. But yeah, it's going to be an eventful one. And Terry Robb, welcome to the Bustalgia, mate. How are you doing tonight?
Not too bad. I'm still buzzing from watching the show last night, the one that the guys recorded on Monday with Richard Gordon. I thought it was absolutely amazing. And for me, I've been listening to that voice on the radio for about 30 years now. So to see that guy sitting on the Boise bus last night and like me sitting on it tonight, it just brings out what the Boise bus is all about. It's for absolutely everybody. In terms of tonight's show, I'm probably slightly apprehensive because when I'm doing post-match pitch, I can't even remember stuff that happened in the match, and that's only about an hour before. And you're trying to take me back 15 years here, but we'll see how we get on.
Oh, we'll get through it. Don't worry about that. See, I'll keep you right anyway, so don't worry. You know me, I just got a million miles per hour doing this, so don't worry. I'll tee you up for the information that you need. But you'll find as we go on, things will just pop into your head. You'll be like, oh, God, I remember that happening. So don't worry about going off on any tangents if something just comes into your head about that season. we more than welcome it. And besides, could Richard Gordon do post-match pish to you? You're always welcome on the bus, mate. So don't worry about, see Richard Gordon last night, mate, because, your input is always valued, mate. So it's really good to have you on tonight. And we'll be changing up the lineup pretty much every week. It'll be me with 2 other guests, 3 other guests. We'll just try and mix it up from time to time. But tonight we start 07-08. But first and foremost, guys, traditions have to stick around on Bustalgia. As you know, we always begin with a trivia question at the start of the show, and we come back to the answers at the end. So how we're going to do this, because there's 2 of you on this time, usually just me and Russell. There's 2 guests on tonight. So I'm thinking of doing it in a sort of penalty shootout style, because there's 8 answers to this. So what we'll do is, like, I'll say, right, Jonathan, you give me an answer. And obviously, if you get it right, then it's over to Terry to give me a right answer. And any ones that you don't get between you, we'll go to the comments and see what they get. So if you want to take a pen and paper and take a note of this, or I say I'll come back to the end of the show anyway, but if you want to write it down to just jog your memory throughout the show, then feel free to do so. But tonight's trivia question is, Jan Vennegoor Hesselink scored the goal that won us the title this season. He is one of 9 Dutch players to have played for Celtic. Can you 2 name the other 8 Dutch players who have played for Celtic? So we will be coming back. So as I say, what we'll do is I'll go like, Jonathan, you give me an answer. And if you get one wrong, you're out. So basically it's like a last man standing thing. And if between the 2 of you can't get all 8 of them, we'll see what the comments can come up with. So have a wee think of that as we're going along, guys. Have a wee think.
I think I've got a few already, but I'll keep stewing. I'll let other people have a guess.
Okay, doke. So let me just man the banners here. And just a reminder to everyone, I'm doing the comments and the banners and stuff that I will get to comments, but I've also got a plethora of notes in front of me as well. So it's like I'm a bit all over the place, but I will interact with the comments as much as I can. So just remember that, folks. I will get to them. So we'll start as usual. Now, obviously, we're doing Bustalgia over the summer. We do the pop culture rewind and different headlines. I've covered a lot of them from 94 all the way through to we did 2016 the other night. So a lot of stuff is going to be going over a lot of old ground, you'll find. So I'm going to narrow this bit down, because with the Celtic chat, it's going to take majority of the show. So it's going to be a little bit condensed, the pop culture rewind. But hey, if you're brand new to the show and you've discovered this new series on the channel, you can go back and watch all the old tournament Bustalgias. They're all on the channel if you want to catch up on all the pop culture rewinds. So what we'll do is we're going to condense it just down to the summer of 2007 and what was going on in the world in terms of football mostly. So I've got, as usual, the football winners from the season before, what happened to tee us up going into this season. So as usual, Champions League winner, I always start with. This is a significant one for us because we would end up playing this team during the 07-08 season. AC Milan became the champions of Europe. They defeated Liverpool 2-1 in Athens, getting revenge for the epic 2005 final that they lost after being 3-0 up. And it came back to a penalty shootout and Liverpool beat them. So AC Milan got a bit of revenge on them. And the UEFA Cup final that year was actually held at Hampden. This is the one where Seville and Espanyol drew 2 apiece. And then Seville won it in penalties. This made it 2 in a row for Seville. I say Seville just win the UEFA Cup, Europa League all the time. If you're ever going to bet on or take a guess who do you think won the Europa League that year, Seville is probably a good place to guess. So over in England, the major winners there were Man United picked up the Premier League that season, and Chelsea won a cup double. They won the FA Cup and the League Cup. They beat Man United and Arsenal in both finals respectively. In Scotland in 07, we won a double. It was Strachan picking up his 2nd league title in a row, and the Scottish Cup was won by us with a 1-0 win over Dunfermline. Do you remember the cult hero that scored the winning goal in 07, guys?
Doombe.
Yep.
Doombe. I remember there was a pile up at my house, so and a few people around and we watched it, and we just jumped on somebody when it went in and started screaming the boy's name. I don't even think he remembered who scored afterwards, but that's what happened to our young lads. We're about 13, 14 years old, and it was just the norm at that point to be doing things like that. But yeah, I always remember that. It was John Perry Doombe. It's actually quite a tidy finish from memory as well.
Was it actually 1-2 on the edge of the box? He just slid it past. I think Alan McGregor might have been in goals for. No, it was the year before McGregor was in goal on loan for Dunfermline because he beat Dunfermline the year before in the League Cup final. He was definitely playing that one. I'm not sure who their goalie was for the 07 one. But then I can always remember at the end of the game, the commentators were really just they sounded gutted that Dunfermline got beat because they gave a good account of themselves and to lose so late on. I can remember Paul Hartley doing a post-match interview and somebody asked him, do you feel bad for Dunfermline today? And he just shrugged his shoulders and went, no. And just walked away because they don't work in Dunfermline, but we've won the cup.
It was just the kind of performance that Gordon Strachan's team came up with. It was, sometimes they weren't the most inspiring team to watch. They weren't expansive in terms of the way they played, but they just got the job done. And some of the games that we'll touch on throughout this season, you know, the team just had a resilience, and they found a way to get the results. And ultimately, I think that kind of reflects Strachan himself, really, because he was sort of stubborn and defiant and resilient, and that result last season, and then some of the games that we're going to touch on the next season just really typified him.
Oh, they were notorious for being a goal down for ages in games and would come back to win 2-1. Usually McManus being part of the scoring for Celtic, 2-1 and McManus anytime.
And Caldwell for the other team.
Caldwell an own goal in the Champions League especially. He loved an own goal. But a bit of a surprise in the League Cup final in Scotland in 2007, Hibs beat Killie, which doesn't sound surprising, but they tanked them 5-1. And the thing I remember about that game is we got like 4 seasons in one day. It was like sunny, then it rained, then there was snow. And then it was just every type of weather you could get. But Hibs ended up tanking Kilmarnock 5-1 that season in the League Cup final. And over in all the other major leagues across Europe, Italy, it was Inter Milan won the league. Real Madrid picked up the title in Spain. VfB Stuttgart were the winners in Germany. Bit of a rarity not to see Bayern Munich win. Lyon picked up the title in France. It was Porto again in Portugal. And PSV Eindhoven were the winners in the Netherlands. Now, one thing I've got here just again to give you an idea of the world of football in the summer of 2007, transfers, because we're talking about club football this time, we're not talking about international football. I've got the top 10 most expensive transfers from that summer, just to give you an idea of where we were in terms of big name players moving around. Now, all these prices are in euros, not because I'm suddenly got a job in the Scottish mainstream media reporting in euros all the time, just because the website I found had everything listed in euros and I couldn't be bothered converting it. So, number 10, Thierry Henry, Arsenal to Barcelona for 24 million euros. We've, of course, encountered Thierry Henry in this coming season for Barcelona.
I think, Phil, we're wishing he stayed at Arsenal after what he does later on.
Yes, indeed. Surprisingly, though, with him being number 10, number 9 was Darren Bent from Charlton to Tottenham for 24.7 million. Darren Bent, wow, ahead of Thierry Henry in the list. Number 8 was Samal from Benfica to Atletico for 25 million euros. Number 7, Owen Hargreaves, Bayern to Man United for 25 million euros. And then what Bayern did with that 25 million is they went and bought Frank Ribery off of Marseille, who would then play there for I don't know, about a decade or something. Ribery was at Bayern for ages. Then there was number 5 in the list, another 25 million one, and this is the player I completely forgot about. Anderson, the Brazilian midfielder. He went from Porto to Man United. I completely forgot about him, but he was a £25 million signing in 2007. Wesley Sneijder went from Ajax to Real Madrid for 27 million. One of the dirtiest defenders I have ever seen, Pepe, from Porto to Real Madrid for 30 million, who sensationally, despite being, as I say, one of the most dirtiest, Sergio Ramos, his partner in crime next to him, had a worse disappointing record than him at Real Madrid. But what a horrible centre-back pair. Don't get me wrong, 2 good centre-backs are what they do, but yeah, they weren't afraid to stick a brutal challenge. I know Pepe and Ramos, but yeah, 30 million total to Real Madrid. Arjen Robben was second in the list, 36 million from Chelsea to Real Madrid. And the number 1 most expensive transfer in 2007 was Fernando Torres going Atletico Madrid to Liverpool for 39 million euros. Old El Nino, what a player he would end up being. But that move to Chelsea, his career just plummeted after that. He just wasn't the same, wasn't he?
No,
That's Stuttgart winning the German league. That's a surprising one because didn't they get relegated? Not straight after, but a number of years after they got relegated. And you just sort of, I don't know, what are Bayern Munich? Are they 10 in a row or something like that at the minute?
At the moment, they're 10 in a row. 10.
It's just very, very difficult to see how any other team's ever going to win it again. And to think a team like Stuttgart, who then went down to the next league, actually did win the title 15 years ago.
One of the best
in the Bundesliga, though, I think Wolfsburg won it a few years after Stuttgart won it from memory as well. Again, it's a bit bizarre, but yeah, you do just associate the Bundesliga as being Bayern Munich's territory. Really, yeah, not anyone else getting really a sniff in, and goes to show if they've won the last 10, it's hard to really see anyone else picking them in Germany, apart from maybe Dortmund these days. But yeah, I mean, I was a bit surprised as well with Stuttgart winning that. I had no recollection of them winning that at all.
I think when Wolfsburg won it, they had the eccentric wacko Felix Magath was the manager. That was one. What was it when he was a Fulham manager? Was it they said they wanted to put cheese on the players' like injured muscles or something like that. That was like a method that he used, and it was like, okay, and you won the Bundesliga. Hold on a second here, we need to check this. But yeah, he seemed like a bit of a nutcase with some of the stories that came out of there. But yeah, doing Bustalgia along the way, there's been a couple of surprises, like Kaiserslautern won the Bundesliga in the late 90s. They say Bayern have always been dominant, but yeah, Stuttgart did stand out. Funny enough, they would play Rangers going into this season in the Champions League. They were in their group, but yeah, they were champions of Germany. But yeah, as I say, with the top transfers there, and you look at the prices there, and I mean, 39 million euros is obviously an incredible price, but then you look down at what players are going for, 100+ million and stuff like that. And I mean, players that aren't even close to Fernando Torres in his prime. When you think about it, some of the players that have moved in the last few years for close to 100 or more than 100 million, you're like, Fernando Torres at this point was just so good. But I say that's just football nowadays. That's where we are at. So, well, usually I move on here to the music stuff. Now, I've said before, when we get into the 2000s, music's pretty poor. But I'm going to take Russell's idea. He said to concentrate on the summer festivals, who the headline acts were. Because I say we're just condensing it down to the summer months for this one going into it. So I've got here all the big headline acts, all the major summer festivals. So let's see which one of these tickles our fancy, guys. So the headline acts at T in the Park that year were on the main stage with the Arctic Monkeys, the Killers, and Snow Patrol. The Cooks and Kasabian were on the NME stage, and in King Tut's tent, it was The View and Kings of the Stone Age. At Glastonbury, the headline acts were the Arctic Monkeys again, the Killers, and The Who. And the Leeds and Reading Festival, the headline acts were Razorlight, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Smashing Pumpkins. I'd say probably T in the Park. I would lean towards if I had a choice out of the three. What about yourself, Jonathan? Would you?
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking at that, some big bands in there, I would certainly be more interested. I think the Killers, for me, was kind of the big thing in the sort of mid-noughties. They were just everywhere at that time, and they just keep producing hit after hit. They were just annoyingly good in that period. The Killers. Kasabian was another one I was particularly fond of back then, and seen them live actually just a few weeks ago when they were supporting Liam Gallagher with my brother, and they were excellent again as well. So they were probably the two standouts. For me, music-wise. Terry, were you going to any of them? Did you see any of those?
Nah, never. Honestly, never been mad keen on any particular kind of music, other than your Celtic music and your traditional Irish. They're the only CDs you'll find in my car. But if you're going to nail me down in one of those, I'll probably go to the one Snow Patrol we're at. But I've never actually been overly active in terms of going to gigs and things like that.
That's fair dues. I've been to one festival. I only went to T in the Park once, but the toilets were quite an experience, put it that way. I'm quite a germaphobe at the best of times, so when I had to go and use the portaloos at T in the Park, I was like, oh my God, get away, I can't. Oh no, nightmares still to this day about it, proper nightmare fuel.
Taking a bottle of bleach with you next time in your bag.
I think I'll need to. I think I will. But yeah, that was my life piece. Another headline I have for music that year in 2007, it was a song you couldn't escape. The dominant song in the charts that was number one for a whopping 10 weeks was Umbrella by Rihanna from May of 2007 all the way up to when this season kicked off at the start of August. I say you couldn't escape it in 2007. It was everywhere. And as for the big films, the big summer blockbusters of 2007, just to give you an idea of where those were, we had Spider-Man 3, the first ever Transformers film, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the Simpsons movie. I'm a big Simpsons fan, but the Simpsons movie, this is an era when the Simpsons are just going off a cliff. Like, see, I feel bad for fans nowadays watching the Simpsons for the first time. I'm like, you have no idea what you're missing. Like the 1990s Simpsons stuff is just it's some of the best TV ever. But by this point, they've definitely jumped the shark without a shadow of a doubt. What else have we got? We get Shrek the Third, Ocean's 13, Superbad, The Bourne Ultimatum, and Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. Now, let's go on to the pre-season roundup. We call it a pre-tournament roundup in our tournament Bustalgia. But in this case, we're going to be looking at the domestic season in terms of club transfers within Scotland and the pre-season friendlies and so forth. We've got all that to look at, so we've got quite a bit of meat on the bone here. So the first thing, guys, and I think this is quite a good talking point, and it kind of gives a massive reflection on Scottish football now. You think of it, this is in 2007. So history was made in the summer of 2007 when Craig Gordon went to Sunderland for £9 million. He wasn't a Celtic player. He wasn't a Rangers player. He was a Hearts player. And here we are now in 2022. And only this summer have we seen a team outside of Celtic and Rangers get I would say, a decent wad of cash. With Calvin Ramsey went to Liverpool for $6.5 million. So, Jonathan, I'll ask you first, mate. What's going wrong? How come like these teams outside of Celtic and Rangers have allowed this to happen? Like they just sell their assets. I mean, the guy that stands out is your namesake, Liam Boyce, who was the top scorer in the Premier League just a few years ago and went away to Burton Albion for like £500,000. And it's like, how has this happened? Is it just the game has been badly undersold up here, or
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there, Phil. I think it is badly undersold, and I don't think the clubs really believe they can command higher fees. I think, in fairness, there is some that are now trying to push back a wee bit. I think, particularly when there's interest from either Celtic or Rangers, I think a lot of clubs now are beginning to hold their own and hope a club from England comes in. A prime example being, John McGinn from a few years ago, and where we could have possibly had him, and then we didn't want to pay the money, and then he got swept away from under our feet by Aston Villa. And there's been a few examples of that down the years, I think. But you are talking even then. It wasn't big money. John McGinn, went for far more than he actually went for at that time. If Craig Gordon was a £9 million player back then, I would say John McGinn was at least the same amount, if not more. I mean, his next move is going to be astronomical. For example, and it's just one of those ones. I just think it always goes back to the fact Scottish football is notoriously bad at selling itself. It always pretty much underplays how good the actual value of the players are, and I think English clubs know they can take advantage of the market. I think the fact as well, we're not helped by the fact that in the SPL just don't negotiate good deals for us at all. That the old Doncaster is about as much use of the chocolate teapot, if we're honest. So there's no much happening there. So they do need to get more money through into the clubs, and if they're not getting enough through ticket sales, then they are going to just snap their hands off when they get a semi-decent offer for something. Get a couple of £1 million, pretty much lands you almost any player outside of Celtic and Rangers in the league. There's not many that would command much more than that, and something we need to look at and change, because if the other clubs are able to start promoting their players and getting the sort of value for money that they're actually worth, it creates a better environment for the league, and it creates competition. You then actually have better players then playing for the other teams as well, and they can reinvest it. So I do think it's something we need to look at, and it's crazy to think Craig Gordon even went for £9 million when you consider how often that actually happens for the other clubs, and it's definitely something we need to look at and see how we can promote things like that happen again in the future.
I think it'll be interesting to see going forward if this is now the catalyst for these kind of deals to continue, or if we just slip back to the way it was. So, for a number of seasons now, Celtic have been sort of getting what we would regard as reasonable fees for some of our better players. We've now seen Rangers finally command a reasonable fee for one of their players. We're now seeing Aberdeen command a good fee for a young prospect. And we've also, I suppose you could include in that Josh Doig, Aaron Hickey. And hopefully it's a case that we continue to be able to, we as in the collective Scottish game are able to continue to get the kind of fees that we're talking about for those players. I mean, the other side of looking at it, when you're Celtic and you're going in and the smaller teams are haggling, you're starting to go, look, just sell them. Just, you're going to sell them to us anyway. Just sell them, and we're haggling over. But it's the same whenever the other teams then come in for our players. We're looking top dollar for them. So whenever we go knock on the doors of a Motherwell for a David Turnbull or a Hibs for a John McGinn, we have to be prepared to pay what those players are actually worth as well. I'll go back to the Craig Gordon one. I think that deal, Roy Keane raised a lot of eyebrows with the amount that he paid for Craig Gordon, and his judgment was seriously questioned as to whether that was an accurate fee for Gordon at that time. But I suppose looking at it from the Hearts' perspective, it's whatever you can get for the player.
I totally, as Russell was put in the comments there, he says, this market we sell to have crazy money, got to milk it. Here's the thing, Russell also told me, Roy Keane has been on record as saying the Craig Gordon signing is the best pound-for-pound signing he made as Sunderland's manager. There's still a save that I think is regarded as the best in English Premier League history. I think it's against Bolton, where he's basically leaning back and scoops it out before it crosses the line. It's an incredible reaction save, and you forget how good Craig Gordon was. And even at Celtic at times, he had some amazing saves. He got back to, maybe not at his best, but there were some moments where there were some blinding saves. But Yeah, £9 million in 2007 for a player outside of the bubble of Glasgow. It's astounding.
Well, it's like he was still nominated for Player of the Year last year. I know he's well past his prime now, Gordon, but he's still producing big saves and big games for Hearts. Now, to be fair, Celtic probably shouldn't have let him go. I mean, it'd have been far better for us when we were going for the 10 with him in goals than bloody Barkas. So, proven himself time and time again. And, when you look back at it, the £9 million probably ended up being a bit of a steal, considering how good he actually was in the Premiership. And I think he proved the doubters wrong. He was just very unfortunate with his injuries. His career for so long.
We'll have a look at some of the other transfers just now in the world of Scottish football, because, of course, this is at a time when, before Rangers liquidation was, where it was basically Celtic and Rangers every season battling for the title. So we have to keep an eye on our rivals. So Rangers that summer had a bit of a spending splurge because Walter Smith came back at the start of 2007, midway through the last season when Paul Le Guen experiment didn't quite work. And up to that point, the two remaining games we played against in that season, they actually beat us. So going into this season, Gordon Strachan's basically on a 0-2 record against them. So Rangers season, our title rivals brought in Lee McCulloch, Carlos Cuellar, Stephen Whittaker, Stevie Naismith, Daniel Kuzan, Jean-Claude Darcheville, Kirk Broadfoot, and Marcus Beasley. They also ousted some absolute flops like Libor Sionko, Carl Svensson, and Philip Sebo. Oh, we will never forget you, Philip Sebo. Also, Gavin Ray and Ian Murray departed. Stefan Kloss and Dado Prussell hung up their boots, or in Kloss's case, hung up the gloves. As for ourselves, though, we are pretty busy as well. We set a bit of Scottish football history. We completed the biggest transfer between two Scottish clubs. We brought in Scott Brown for £4.4 million. Safe to say, guys, that he would go on and become a legendary figure in Celtic's history. But here's my question to you: I'll start with you, Jonathan. Seeing his first couple of seasons, how did you feel that Scott Brown did? Because I don't think we saw the best of Brown till maybe Lennon came in. I thought his first few seasons, it was like he could easily be punted at any point, because it took a wee while for him to find his feet, and especially how this season ends. And you think how we had to bring in Barry Robson and Paul Hartley. So there was a wee spell there. I don't know if you're the same. I know that Liam, who was going to be joining us tonight, he'd actually said to me in the notes he'd sent over that that's how he felt about Brown, where he was keen on him in the first couple of seasons. But what was your feelings, Jonathan?
I mean, when I remember looking back at Brown, I remember thinking, God, this guy's a bit of a headless chicken at times. He seemed to be running about, and he just didn't seem to have the control that his game would eventually get further on in his career. And I vaguely remember he did get himself into some silly situations. His temperament wasn't great. I vaguely remember, I think a couple of years after this one, was at Ibrox, he gets himself sent off under Mowbray maybe in a crunch game and lose 1-0, and the league's pretty much lost on that day. I mean, granted, they weren't going to win the league that season anyway, but he got himself sent off in a stupid fashion from memory. And I think he put his head into somebody from memory. I think he just needed a bit of time to sort out his temperament. He was a young player. He did come for a huge fee, so there was massive expectations on him, I think, probably straight from the word go there. But the reason we actually ended up winning that league, and it's ironic when you now think of how important Scott Brown was, or is, from Celtic's history point of view. But in that season, the reason Celtic won the league was actually because they dropped him, if you ask me. It's mainly because you end up with a midfield of Hartley and Robson for the running at the centre of the park is what actually swings that championship, and for that reason Scott Brown had to drop out, and it was the right decision to make at the time. And I do think it just took him a little bit longer to settle in. But you're right, I think under different management, there's every chance Scott Brown may not have went on to have the career he had at Celtic. Terry, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of Scott Brown signing, I remembered watching Scott Brown live at Celtic Park against Celtic. He was up against Lennon, and I just remembered him as this real sort of gallus young lad, not playing in that kind of midfield general role, but a little bit more forward, where he was involved in the attacking side of things. And I remembered a Scott Brown who was always on the edge of things. He was in the edge of the other team's box. He was trying things. And I kind of thought that's the player that we were getting. And in the pre-season games, I remember watching, can't remember if it was Setanta or what it was at the time, but I remember seeing the games, and I was thinking, yeah, do you know what? This is going to be entertainment. But he then seemed to evolve over the next couple of years into the sort of legend and leader that he became, but not as that midfielder that I thought we had signed, as a more sort of reserved, holding midfield general type player, almost similar to Neil Lennon that I had seen him give such a torrid time to at Celtic Park a few years before. Obviously became, as I say, a legend and a Celtic great. But part of me was that summer was so excited because of the fee, so excited because we felt we had got one up on the other guys across the city who thought he was a certainty to join them.
Yes,
and because of
right.
what I'd seen from him in a Hibs shirt, I was very, very excited. And I don't think we got the player that I thought we were getting, but we got a completely different player who obviously went on to make a really telling contribution in the club's history.
He did. Now, I'm trying to rack my brain here. I'm actually stuck on this one. Did Tony Mowbray give him the captaincy, or was it Neil Lennon gave him it when Lennon took over on that temporary basis? Because something in my head tells me Mowbray gave him the armband just before.
It wasn't Lennon. I actually thought, was it not Strachan in his last season, or was
McManus was there with Strachan at the time
last season? So it must have been Mowbray then. I don't think it was Lennon.
When I said about, like, I felt like there could have been a moment where he could have gone. See, when the infamous night we lost to St Mirren 4-0, and that was Mowbray's last night, we were such a mess that night. Scott Brown finished that game playing it right back. I can remember him getting the armband at some point during that game, and I wonder if that was the night that it happened, where somebody had gone off as a sub and gave him the armband. I can remember him playing it right back because we were just all over the place. And it was generally like once Mowbray got the sack, and after that debacle, I was like, Scott Brown, what happens with him now? But yeah, it was under Neil Lennon. It just went, just one of those players that he managed to resurrect, which Lennon doesn't get enough credit for. Same with the Georgios Samaras resurrection as well, because Samaras was going nowhere before Lennon came in. So
as a manager, is vastly, I think, underestimated. Phil, when you look back on it, he pretty much transformed that whole team from what he inherited, getting smashed off St Mirren 4-0, finishing behind Rangers, to then pretty much should have won the league the next season despite revamping the whole squad. The amount of changes he made was very similar to what Postecoglou did for us last season in terms of the number of personnel that would have played in that St Mirren game, and then you looked at the one that would have started the first game of the following season. Only Brown and Samaras I would have thought would have actually been the two that might have stayed. I don't think there have been many others that were actually still in the first 11 at that point.
Aye, definitely. Now, another few transfers as well that we wrapped up that summer. Massimo Donati joined from AC Milan. Scott McDonald came in from Motherwell. I remember the reaction to that at the time from a lot of people online, because this was in social media day and age was starting to come about. A lot of Celtic fans didn't take too well to that news initially, given what happened a few years before. We also signed Chris Killen on a free transfer from Hibs, and I didn't even know this was I didn't know he was on a loan originally. I thought we signed John Joe Perry-Adumbe permanently in the previous January window. Turns out he was only on loan for that half a season. We made the deal for the cup final hero Perry-Adumbe permanent in the summer, so that was our summer spending for 2007-2008. But some first team fringe players that left. We have a bit of the dead wood getting cleared out here. Adam Virgo departed. Thomas Gravison left. David Marshall, Craig Beattie, Kenny Miller was sold a couple of games into the season, and Neil Lennon went to Nottingham Forest. He finished up at the end of the 07 season, and a few youngsters as well who got ousted were Scott Fox, Rocco Quinn, Paul Lawson, and Michael Gardine. Now, we had a bit of a busy pre-season. We were all over the place. We were the Harlem Globetrotters, essentially. We started off in Switzerland. We went and played Basel and Young Boys of Bern. We beat Basel 1-0, but got absolutely tanked off Young Boys of Bern 4-1. We then went to England and beat Peterborough 2-1, and then smashed Queen's Park Rangers 5-1 at Loftus Road. Then we had two games in the United States of America, where we lost to an MLS All-Stars team 2-0 before drawing 1-1 with Chicago Fire. And then a game against Newcastle, getting beat 4-1 at St James's Park. But we're finishing up at Celtic Park with a friendly against Parma. This was actually the first game that I went to after becoming a season ticket holder. We beat them 1-0. And it was Aidan McGeady that scored, but it was Scott Brown's debut game. But if I remember correctly, not exactly a very exciting one. That Parma team were very different from the Parma team of the 90s, which had a who's who of top talent. But yeah, that Parma team had failed quite a bit at that point. But yeah, that wraps up the pre-season roundup. Now, usually at this point, after we do the sort of initial bit, we would do like a musical break, but that's usually because we're like an hour or something into the show at that point. But as I said, I'm going to have to trim it down because I've covered a lot of this stuff already, a lot of previous headlines. So I say, guys, we'll go in, we'll take a break, maybe somewhere after the hour, we'll put in like a musical break and then take 2 minutes instead of putting it in just now, because it'll be very lopsided if we do. So we'll just get straight into the season, the 2008. And the first thing is, got to start at the start. It's always a logical place to go. So as I say, it's a stuttery start because Celtic did not have a great first half of the season. We started with a 0-0 draw at home to Kilmarnock in the defence of our title. But yeah, usually under Strachan's teams, usually the case, as I said earlier on, this team didn't really know when they were beat at times. We had a few memorable games where we were 1-0 down to very late in the game, and we would suddenly just spring into life and turn that around. And the two ones that stand out in the first half of this season is we were getting beat up at Pittodrie 1-0 for about an hour. Craig Brewster, I believe he was like 38 or 39-year-old Craig Brewster at this point, put Aberdeen 1-up until Massimo Donati scored, and I believe Kenny Miller's last 2 goals for the club to give us a 3-1 victory. But the one that I think that stands out in a lot of people's heads here is Gretna were in the Premier League for the first time ever. They were ground sharing at Motherwell, and they were beating us 1-0 until the 85th minute, when Chris Killen equalised, and then Scott McDonald snatched a winner. And what I remember most about this, I don't know if you can envision the goal in your head. The McDonald winner came from a shot outside the box, and he was in the way of it, and he took a touch and put it in the net. And my first thought was, he's going to get flagged offside here. He's probably standing in offside position. But the relief and the joy when it was like, oh, he actually stood, because, oh man, if we dropped points to Gretna, that would have been... I think at that point, Gretna had started the season with like mostly losing all their games. Like they were like rock bottom at that point, and they're 1-0 up on us till the 85th minute. But Jonathan, do you remember that one at all? Because that was a squeaky bum moment in that game.
Yeah, no, definitely. I do actually remember that. I remember thinking we're actually going to lose. I don't remember us being particularly great. I remember Gretna getting in front in that game, and from memory, it was actually quite a good goal they scored. It was a long range, I'm pretty sure, from about 25-30 yards. I might be wrong on that. I've not seen it back in years and years and years. I've got a good feeling it was quite a good goal they actually got in that game, to be fair to them. And then I vaguely remember they packed the box, and it was like proper siege mentality. I don't think we created an awful lot of chances that day. It looked like it was going to be one of those typical shitty away games where we just weren't going to get the job done. We were just going to huff and puff and probably end up losing. And then I remember Chris Killen scores as a header, I'm pretty sure, at the back post.
Yep.
He managed to find a way through. It's probably the most memorable thing I can think of Chris Killen doing in a Celtic shirt. To be fair, he was good at Hibs, and there was hope they might have been one of these ones that could have kicked on at Celtic, but there was a few signed around that time by Strachan. Derek Bragdon was another one that did well at Hibs, and it never really worked out at Celtic as well. But that was a big moment when Killen equalised. You're thinking you're going to get out of here with a point, and then you're right. The winner goes in, and you're thinking this has got to be offside. So he was completely free as well. It was like the defensive line seemed like it pushed up quite a bit from Gretna, so you weren't expecting him to be onside at all. And then it did count. You were thinking, thank fuck for that, and it was just total relief. And to get out of that game with a win, you're like, fucking hell, no more of that, please, Celtic. And then although it became a bit of a Strachan trademark as the season would go on at times, Terry. Do you remember much of that game?
My memory isn't as vivid as yours around the game, but what I do remember is I'd already made my mind up about Chris Killen at that point, and I just remember him scoring the goal, and it's kind of one of those ones. Oh, big man, I take it all back. But as you say, I don't remember him doing a great deal after that. But when you get to the final count at the end of the season, those 2 goals in that game were of huge importance.
They were indeed. I think Chris Killen might have scored in the infamous Wembley Cup. Remember, under Mowbray, we went down and beat Spurs' first team with a reserve team. I'm sure Chris Killen might have scored in that one, and maybe Samaras scored the other one. But yeah, he didn't do much in a Celtic shirt, it's safe to say. But that was, and Terry is right, at the end of the day, all the points count. And when you look at how close this league was, that victory over Gretna could easily been a loss, because it was a 1-0 to Gretna till the 85th minute. But we managed to turn that around. But it's a massive trademark of Strachan's team during that whole era when he was manager. Games where we're just not at the races at all. We're 1-0 down till late in the game, and suddenly we just find 3 goals out of nowhere. A
lot of 1-goal victories that season, if I recall, Phil. Especially, I know we're going to forward on to that sort of memorable last 2 months of the season. But I think when we look at that, out of the last 7 games, 5 of them were 1-goal victories, and just such fine margins. And as you say, a linesman's flag on any of those occasions, and they're usually not too shy on putting them up, would have made a difference.
Yeah, the telltale sign usually is when a guy scores a goal and he even hesitates. And if I remember when McDonald scored, even he was a bit unsure, and then it was like, oh, it stood. But what a relief that was that day. So, but yeah, that's a Gretna, because I don't. Something in my head told me that Gretna didn't even finish this season. They did manage to finish all their games, but yeah, they went in administration like before the end of the season, released majority of their team, so they had like a skeleton squads to finish the season. But yeah, it all fell apart for them. But yeah, if we'd lost to them, we would never have lived that one down. But another few clanger results in the first half of the season. We go to Ibrox for the first meeting against Rangers that season, get absolutely done. Natural Novo scored twice against us. Barry Ferguson scored the other one. Evander Stowe gave away a really clumsy penalty as well, where he chopped down, can't remember who it was he weaved out the box, but yeah, he just clumsily chops him down, gives Novo the chance to get a brace. Unforgivable in my eyes, letting that wee guy score 2 against us. Absolutely unforgivable, but we were terrible in that one. But another game that stood out, and this, for me, this ground was never really a happy hunting ground for Arthur Boric, but we had a game at Easter Road where he had an absolute clanger of a day, where Hibs took the lead through Stevie Fletcher. A shot from outside the area deflected off Caldwell, and it wrong-footed Boric. But when we equalised, when McGeady scores the equaliser to make it 1-1, Boric made a point of running over to the Hibs fans and celebrating, doing that little dance that he did, like when we beat Spartak on penalties. And that would come back to haunt him, because with a few minutes to go, we had tied it 2 apiece. I think it was Buzalan. Guillaume Buzalan has a shot from the edge of the area. It's a pretty relatively easy shot for Boric. It's probably hitting the side netting, and he palms it right down in front of himself, and he loses control of it, and Dean Shields runs in to slide into the net. And as I say, it would not be a happy hunting ground for Boric. A year later, that would be the same place where he would get done by John Rankin with what they called the Swiggler. Remember that one from about 40 yards? So, yeah, Easter Road was the best of places. The Squiggler, that was it. The Squiggler, not the Swiggler. But yeah, it wasn't. I don't think Easter Road was the happiest place for Arthur Boric at times, but he didn't have a good day that day and ended up a bit of an egg on his face when we lost 3-2 to the Hibs.
Yeah, it was not one of his better performances. He had, as you say, a few of those bad ones. Hibs were still a pretty solid team back then. It was probably one of the harder of your away days. They still had a pretty good team still put together, even though it was beginning to break up, and Celtic and Rangers, I think, pretty much went and nabbed most of their best ones over the next year or so, out of the ones they hadn't already taken. But looking back on that game, Boric definitely didn't have his finest moment in a Celtic jersey, and it wouldn't be the last time he was to play like that. I think in some ways, because, as I say, Hibs were still one of your solid teams, as you mentioned earlier. They just won the League Cup the season before, and granted they had lost a few of their key players, but they were no mugs in the league. You could probably have almost forgiven a result like that, but it was just the case that in that first half of the season, with just too many games that were going in a similar sort of vein, where Celtic just didn't get the results that they were needing, and question marks started to get asked. Terry, have you got any memories of those Boric mistakes? I'm struggling through these pictures. I remember the Squiggler one very well. I think everyone remembers that. Where I
remember that one
from the 35 yards. And I think I can vaguely remember the spill in that game, but it's all a bit blurry for me. I try not to think much about Celtic defeats, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't blame you, Jonathan. You don't want to remember the ones, but yeah, as I say, Buzalan, I'm pretty sure, has the shot, and he palms it right down into the path of Dean Shields, who just runs in and slides into the net, and it's like, oh, Arthur, what have you done?
Boric just always had that Rick in him, but some of the saves that he made more than made up for the points that he lost for you. I think there was one of the games that season as well. I think it's the Spartak Moscow game in the qualifier for the Champions League, where you just seen all sides of him. You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and he just had that in his game. He could do something brilliant, and the next minute he could do something awful, and the next minute he could do something completely stupid. And that's just what you got. That's the package you got with him. And he's still in my book, he's the best Celtic goalkeeper that I have seen, but he did have a Rick in him, and he did save most of them up for Hibernian.
Yeah, it does. It seemed to be an unhappy hunting ground for him. But yeah, as I say, that first half of the season continues. There's a few more stuttery results. We end up going to the League Cup really pathetically to Hearts. I was at that game. I was actually sat in a different seat from where my usual season ticket seat would have been. And I was up in the heavens, basically, of the Lisbon Lions stand, and I'm still convinced to this day that Hearts' first goal should be accounted. They broke down the wing and won the ball off of one of our players, and I swear this ball goes out for a throw-in. Linesman doesn't flag for it, and Hearts basically break right up that wing and squares it across, and it's Velichka scores from the edge of the area. And it's like, I'm certain that ball went out of play. It's like the way he controls it on the pretty much on the sideline. I definitely do, because everyone's shouting for it. All the crowd down at that bit of the south stand, all the Celtic players are like, that's a throw-in, ref. Referee doesn't give it, they break down the park and they score from it. But yeah, Hearts knocked us out of the League Cup 2-0 at Celtic Park. But then the month of December comes along, and this is where you're beginning to think, right, this is not going to be our season, because so many things go wrong. We actually start the month drawing 1-1 at Tynecastle. We're beating them 1-0 till the 90th minute, and then Gary Caldwell clumsily gives a penalty away. There's a shot from the edge of the area, and it's bouncing up there, and it's dropping down to a Hearts player, but it looks like it's going to go out of play, and it's not really a threat. And Gary Caldwell runs up and pushes him in the back, gives away a penalty. Velichka tucks it away 92nd minute to make it 1-1. We drew with St Mirren 1-1 at Celtic Park, one of the coldest games I have ever been to. We had to rely on Derek Riordan coming on as a sub and scoring with about 5 minutes to go to make it 1-1. We also had a game up at Cali Thistle where we were 2-0 up. Vennegoor Hesselink scored 2 goals in quick succession, like the 25th and 26th minute. We're cruising. Somehow we conspire to lose that game 3-2. It was, to say, December, it was all just falling to pieces. Plus, on top of that, we had an injury crisis at the back. They got so bad that Gordon Strachan had to swallow his pride and go back to Bobo Baldi, who, remember, guys, he completely alienated from the team, and basically there was a standoff between the two. And I had to kind of go to him and go, listen, mate, I know I've kind of been a bit bad to you. I've kind of treated you a wee bit bad and, told you, just kept you sitting in the stands, but kind of need you to play at Tannadice, because we went to Tannadice on Boxing Day and had to win. There was no ifs or buts about it. We had to get a result that day. Bo Baldi, to his credit, despite, I say I'll obviously we'll come on to who's more to blame in this whole argument, but Baldi could have threw his toys. Baldi could have been unprofessional, but he wasn't. He was actually rock solid. He ended up playing 2 games that season against Gretna at home and up at Tannadice, and we won both of them. But yeah, Jonathan, I take it you remember the whole Bobo Baldi, Gordon Strachan standoff, and where do you feel like who was right in that one, or was there anybody right? Was Strachan out of hand really?
It was one of those ones I do vaguely remember it, and I always remember thinking, God, it was one of those ones I think always counted against Strachan from my recollections of it, because people looked at Bobo Baldi and he was a bit of a cult hero, and in some ways growing up with him, he was kind of that big rock solid centre half. He was kind of like iconic as part of the Martin O'Neill team. There's the Claxon 47 minutes. Martin O'Neill got it. But I always remember him being like one of my favourite centre halves growing up, Baldi, and and even the people I was friends with at the time all thought the kind of same, and you were kind of looking at it and thinking, how can Bobo Baldi be just completely left out in the cold when you've got guys like McManus and Caldwell in front of him? And it was a bit of a head scratcher. I never really felt Strachan had good enough reasons to be doing that, and I kind of felt he already began at that point to really start alienating the fans a wee bit, because you've got to remember, Phil, fans were turning on Gordon Strachan when he was in charge of Celtic, and I think that was part of the reason why he ends up walking the following season after this one, is the fans almost played a large part because they were just fed up of him, and I think part of that was down to the situation that he had this standoff with Baldi, and he refused to play him, and then, as you say, he actually comes in, and Baldi would have been every right to have turned around and say, well, you need me now, but you've not given me a chance at all, and I'm just not going to bother. But in fairness to him, he puts the boots on and he puts in 2 solid performances, as you say. But then what's his reward for that? He just ended up getting put straight back out of the team and back in the stands after it. So there's not even like a massive amount of thanks given really by Strachan. It's like, you've served your purpose, now back to the stands you go. I'm not letting this drop. And I think he could be a bit petty with things like that, Terry. Yeah. And what were your sort of recollections of that back at the time?
I can't help but think this was part of the sort of post-Martin O'Neill downsizing. So if I'm thinking back to that time, Martin's been brought in, probably chosen by Dermot Desmond. I think Gus Hiddink was the board preference, and Dermot does what Dermot did what Dermot does, and he waded in with Martin O'Neill, and Martin was absolutely back to the hilt. We looked at some of the transfer fees that were paid across Europe at that time. At that time, our record transfer was 6 million, and we've only paid more than that once. Well, you might argue Jota was 6.5, but the only time we've paid more than 6 was for Odsonne Edouard. Martin was back to the Hills at that time, and not just in terms of transfer fees, but also in terms of wages. And not long before he left, he gave Bobo a bumper contract on a salary which absolutely no club across the world was going to give Bobo Baldé. As much as he had his qualities, I think he was, and we talked about this in the boss a wee bit around other players before, he was a cult hero for me. The whole Bobo's going to get you. Yeah, see if the ball was in the air, Bobo would get it, Bobo would win it. But see, with the ball at his feet, Bobo was an absolute bomb scare. And he was similar to the likes of Boyata, where other teams would just let him have the ball because you were more than likely going to get it. I do remember now there were some times where he ran the length of the pitch, but nobody wanted to go and tackle him. They were kind of waiting for him to give it away, kind of thing. So I remember I absolutely loved him because I just loved my centre halves to go and win the ball. I loved my centre halves to go in and tackle, and he was good at the simple things. But when he had to play football, he just didn't have it. And I think I'm trying to remember. I don't know for sure if Alan Thompson was still hanging around at the start of this season or if he had gone.
Thompson had left. I know he went to Leeds on loan initially, then they made it permanent. So it might have been the last of the 06-07 season. I think he might have departed.
I think it was still under Strachan though.
It was Strachan.
Sort of similar thing where he felt he was still worth his place and he wasn't getting game time. Another one that would have been on a huge salary. And I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, and my own guess is Gordon's come in, and part of Gordon's remit is get rid of all these big earners that we've allowed Martin to bring in. And unfortunately, Bobo couldn't find any other club that was going to give him anywhere near the salary that he was on at Celtic.
There is going to Russell, 28k a week. In my head, I thought it was more 30, than that.
I've 30 in my head. And again, if we were prepared to pay Bobo Baldé 30 grand a week in 2008, you know, how many players at the club at the minute who can play football are getting that kind of money? Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
but I think it was probably Martin O'Neill legacy. He's just thrown a grenade. Here, Strachan, this is your problem now. And Bobo hadn't played for ages up until that game, and he didn't feature a great deal after it. And then he actually stayed on, I think, till the summer of after the following season, till his contract completely ran down. I think there was a legal issue as well, where he was taking the club to court over some unpaid wages or something, which he then dropped. But he hung around until his contract finished. You can argue he was totally in his rights to do so. Celtic gave him that deal, and he was prepared. He was prepared to play. Yeah, he was prepared to play. And to be fair to the guy, when he was called on, he came in and he performed. There was something else I read as well. I think they said that game that Bobo came in against Dundee United was the first clean sheet that we'd had in over a year in away games.
It could have been something like that. You know, something rings a bell in my head about that. Aye, because Bobo Baldé was amazing in that game, and so many people were like, "What's he going to be like in this?" You know, he's not played a first team game. He's clearly been alienated by the manager. You say you don't know what he was going to do, but no, he was immense that day. Absolutely immense.
Yeah, I just think Go on ahead, Jonathan. No, you're okay, mate. Go on ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think it's amazing that you consider as well where his mindset must have been, Baldé, when he's been out in the cold for so long, to then end up being able to be so professional about it and actually get on with it and still put in the performances that he did. Speaks volumes about him. And, you know, Jamie, go back on the point on wages. I think, you know, he's absolutely not going to be going anywhere if nobody's willing to offer him a similar salary. And let's be honest, Baldé was aging at this point as well. And no other club's going to be wanting to look at him and offer him. And let's face it, nobody's going to be offering him anywhere close to 30 grand a week. So he's obviously, you know, going to be thinking of himself at number one and run that down. I don't have a massive issue, you know, with that. It was a bit different with some of the other players Strachan tried to get rid of over that period as part of the downsizing sort of strategy the club had at the time. You know, I remember Chris Sutton obviously being shown the door fairly promptly after Strachan came in within a season. I think he was gone by the end of his first season, and even he says in his books and things like that, Strachan pretty much just told him, "You're not playing because you're on too much money and we need to get rid of you." So I would imagine similar conversations were had with Baldy. But, he's got that big a contract and he's not getting offered it elsewhere. He's going to hang around. But I do think mentally, from the point of view that, he's pretty much just been told he's got nothing to offer the club and he's not going to be playing. And if he get called upon in those circumstances, I think it was a credit to him how he mentally managed to handle that.
Well, there's Edmund Byrne coming in with an eye-watering stat. Under O'Neill, we were in the top 5 clubs for paying wages in the UK. Yikes, when you think about it again, when you look at it now, the way Scottish football is, but at that point in time, Celtic were in the top 5 UK teams paying wages. But yeah, Strachan definitely had to get the wage bill down, and he had no real qualms about dropping players and just telling them no. So the Baldy thing as well, I don't think it'll get to this stage, but I look at the Christopher Julian situation right now and I'm like, I really hope that doesn't happen with Ange. I hope we don't find a point. Because remember last season, we did have a lot of injuries from time to time. There was spells where everyone was dropping and I was like, imagine if that happens and Christopher Julian, we've no shifted him. He's clearly been alienated, not being part of the plans, and he's still there. We can't get rid of him. And then it's like, listen, mate, we've got this game against Livingston. An away game midweek, Livy. Kind of need you to play. So it's like, I just see parallels to that. So hopefully it's not going to go that way with Christopher Julian. But when I was looking at the Baldy stuff from years ago and looking at that now and going, oh no, don't tell me this is going to happen again. But fingers crossed we don't get to that point. But the 2 wins over, as I say, the Baldy played in against Gretna and Dundee, steadies the ship at the end of December, sets us up for the new year, the Old Firm game, because it was the Old Firm then. Before anyone in the comments when he goes, you can't say Old Firm. It was 2008 we're talking about. It's a bit different back then. But that game did not happen on the scheduled date because the death of Phil O'Donnell occurred a few days before. Probably not the best idea to be having a very high-tempered fixture between Celtic and Rangers just a couple of days after a man who was a very important player for us because he was part of the 10 and the team that stopped the 10 in 1998. But this was surreal because I can remember listening to the radio. The games on the 29th, they were playing Dundee United and we played Gretna. And it was on the radio, like coming back from the game, and it was saying there'd been an incident at Murrell's ground, and it was shocking just hearing it on like Sports Sound and talking about it. It's like he was pronounced dead not long after his collapse. It wasn't like hours later because I literally heard it on like the breaking news, like just shortly after the game. Well, the game got abandoned, obviously, but what an absolute shock to the system that was. And Phil O'Donnell, a great player for Celtic. Just again, I was hampered by injuries at big times, but man, like this was just like it rocked Scottish football. It really did because he was a great guy, wasn't he, Jonathan?
Yeah, no, it really was, and as you say, it was a massive shock to see something like that happen in a football match. You just wouldn't really expect to ever be in a position where you're watching somebody collapse and then pass away. Within hours of that happening, and it was kind of common. It has been a bit more of a trend. You have seen that happening more and more, I think, over the last 5 years of unfortunately players collapsing and having incidents like but thankfully a lot of them have managed to pull through. I remember Fabrice Moamba, that happened in the Premiership. I think 4 or 5 years later, more recently, we had Christian Eriksen doing it for Denmark. And I do think that hopefully we're now in a better position in a footballing sense with the defibrillators and everything else now being a lot more easily accessible, that we don't see situations like that going forward. But I remember at the time being completely shocked. I just thought something's happened to him, but he'll come back. He's probably just, he's just ended up lightheaded or something like that. He's not eating properly and he's ended up just fainting, something along those sort of lines. You never really expected to go to that sort of extreme, really. And it was completely shocking to find that was what had happened to him, Terry. Can you remember much about that?
Can't remember much about the day that Phil passed away, kind of thing, but I do remember him signing for Celtic. I remember him playing for Celtic. If I was trying to describe him to someone from the current day team, and it's not just that he came from Motherwell, but David Turnbull, attacking midfielder, always good for a goal. I remember O'Donnell's his debut for Celtic. We beat Partick Thistle 2-0, and he scored both of the goals, and he went on to have a really good Celtic career. And then obviously, as you say, he was playing for Motherwell that day, and it just brings things into perspective. You go to the football and you're standing there and you're shouting at players, and something like that just brings it all into perspective. He probably had family members at the game. He's gone down. What does it feel like to be those people? Probably, nobody has any kind of inclination as to what's actually happened. Then, as time sort of passes on, there's a recognition this is something a wee bit more serious, and it just must be awful to if you're a family member or a friend or of a player, and that happens, and to be standing in that ground, and it's not nice. And we've seen it recently as well. Last season there wasn't there games where Jono's touched on it there about the equipment and stuff that we have now. There's actually been games that I've seen where the games have been stopped because somebody in the crowd has actually taken ill, and the game's been stopped to allow those people to get attention. And I suppose if you think about it, in the law of averages, with big gates across Britain and across Europe, 60,000 people, there's always going to be somebody who takes ill in some kind of way at a game. And I suppose the law of averages would say there will be somebody, most weekends at a football match who will take seriously ill. And it is good that everything's moving forward, and that we can try and get help to anybody that needs it. But not a nice time to a nice thing to remember.
No, definitely not. And as was the theme with this season that we're going to be touching on, this is a game that obviously get moved back onto because I was the SPL at the time, SFA. It was always their answer. So many fixtures get moved around, and we'll be talking about that in a wee while. But this is
the point, Phil, where that season starts to draw synergies with this season.
Yeah,
because at that time, Rangers were the league in terms of what the league table looked like. Rangers were at the top, Celtic were chasing, and then the game that was meant to be played didn't get played. Then it got put out. Then things started to go into our favour. But also in that same season, those guys got to the UEFA Cup final. So from this point onwards, things start to align to this season a little bit. And also, we obviously end up winning the league.
We do. Similar story. So what we'll do just now, if we've just passed the hour mark, is I'll put in the wee musical interlude just now, and then when we come back, we'll be talking about our European campaign. We've still got that to come up. And as I just alluded to there, we've got a lot of carnage around fixture rearrangement in the 07-08 season. The second half of the season is an utter riot with games on the backlog. And then we'll be touching on the medical run-in. So I will tee up the music just now, and we shall be back in 2, folks. So talk to you in a mo.
Some of his comments about me deliberately trying to cause controversy. Well, I work in the media now, and you've got someone sitting there next to you who's an embarrassment to the media profession. He's an apologist. He's a charlatan.
And we are back. So yeah, folks, we shall continue on now with the 07-08 season. So let's concentrate now. After that stuttery start that was going on for Celtic domestically, it's a little bit erratic in the first half of the season. But in Europe, bit of deja vu from the season before. We're punching above our weight again. We're taking scalps. Remember the days, guys, in the Champions League we used to beat teams when Celtic Park was a scary place to come? Well, in the 07-08 season, that was exactly the case. So, of course, it started with a very, very memorable qualifying game. We had to actually play a qualifier. Only one. The days when we had one qualifying round to play, instead of the usual 4 going to the backwaters of Europe, going out to like Armenia and stuff like that for qualifiers. Oh, no, we only had one qualifying game to play, but it was against Russian giants, Spartak Moscow. We got a draw out there, though, with Paul Hartley scoring a fantastic, diving header, or I remember it was across from McDonald, and he just comes running, bullet header past the goalkeeper. And Hartley wasn't exactly notorious at that point for scoring, but we got a 1-1 draw out there, which was a hell of a good result to take back to Glasgow. But then the second game in Glasgow ends 1 apiece. I actually talked about this when I did my Celtic story with Dale, because this was the first game that I was sat in my season ticket in 138. I'm now in 139 these days, but for the first few years, I was in 138, and that noise when the final Spartak penalty gets missed and Boric saves it, when the player comes up, just the roar around the stadium trying to put him off, it's generally still one of the loudest I have ever heard it. But the moment from that game that always stands out to people is the image of the pylon where Boric runs away celebrating, all the subs, does the wee jazz hands, and then you've got the Tommy Burns image where Tommy Burns is jumping on top of them as well, and it's just like, what a moment. Because in the stadium they played the Champions League theme music as well as that celebration was going on, and what a buzz it was. But that game had everything, especially for me. My first game as a season ticket holder, I'm like, wow, welcome to Celtic, Phil. Jesus Christ, what a way to start. But man, that would just set the tone for this coming season in Europe. But guys, Jonathan, what do you remember of that one? It was a mental game that had it all.
I do remember that fairly well. Pavlyuchenko, I think, played for Spartak Moscow at that time.
He did indeed.
Yes, and he would go on to have quite a career as well. They were
he missed a penalty. He missed a penalty early in the game at the post.
He did. We missed a penalty in the game. I think Nakim, was it Venegar Hesselink missed a penalty?
Missed one.
Did he not?
He did. He did indeed.
Yeah, you remember that. He went and leathered it, and he does the exact same thing actually in the shootout. He tries to leather it, but he actually puts it in the top corner, and it's like a perfect penalty, which is what he meant to do the first time round. And he had the same. He had some balls to try the exact same thing again after he rattled the bar with all it.
Totally.
Fair play to him. He did do that. I remember it fairly well. The shootout. I mean, as I say, it's a very tough team to have drawn against. In the Champions League qualifiers. I certainly wouldn't be wanting us to play a team like that in the qualifiers even this season, despite how well we went last year. But when you're looking back at it, I think Gary Caldwell, he has a penalty in that, does he not, Phil? Does he not hit like the first one?
I was saying that to Dale. I remember at the time when it's like, right, we're waiting for, I think Spartak we took the first penalty in the shootout. And obviously the players are down at the halfway line. So in the stadium, you're waiting. Because when you're watching on TV, the commentators can sometimes give you an idea of who's coming forward. You're waiting for somebody to come forward, and Gary Caldwell begins trotting forward to the halfway line. And it's like, oh no. But he pinged it right in the top corner. I think Derek Riordan took a really good penalty. Zuraski took one as well. Who did Nakamura miss for us in the shootout? I think Nakamura might have missed.
Hit the bar and didn't cross the line. It was like similar to Zidane's in the World Cup final a couple of years previous. But Zidane got the break where it crossed the line and Nakamura's bounced out. So there was a few dodgy penalties. I think as well in that game, Terry, I think this might be what you were alluding to in the first half of the show, was the ugly side of Artur Boric, because he gets into a scrap with Lee Naylor. I'm pretty sure. Like Naylor lets the ball go out. I don't know if it's a corner or something. He lets it go. And Boric just pretty much goes up there and grabs him by the throat. You're thinking you're going to see a Kieran Dyer, Lee Bowyer. You're thinking, oh, for fuck's sake, we're going to end up with 2 men sent off here. And they all have to pretty much get involved and get in between them. There was something else there. I don't know. What do you think was going through Boric's head at that moment? Does anyone really know?
Probably just a normal day at the office for him. Like I said, in that game, he wasn't flawless. I think there was one ball that he came for that he completely flapped at. Then there was that moment with Naylor, and then he ended up being the hero of the hour at the end, which is just typical Boric.
That is. It's a microcosm of Artur Boruc that entire game, but yeah, he's does everything in it. But yeah, what a way to qualify, and I say a really difficult team for us to get through. So
just that's what Jonathan picked up on there. That if you look at the teams that have knocked us out in recent years, this was a really good side. This was a side with huge Brazilian influence. And look at some of the players that they had. They had Petty Klose, who was the Croatian international goalkeeper, I think. They had a guy called Bistrov, who was an absolute flyer on the right wing. They had Pavlichenko, who we've touched on. Then the two Brazilians. They had Wellington, who played up front. And then they had a guy called Mozart, who was orchestrating things from the middle of the park.
Orchestrating, very good. Do you know when you said Mozart, my head was actually going, think of like an orchestra-related pun. Think of one.
Yeah. But they were a good side, and we done for them, and it's just so frustrating when you see some of the muck that we've gone out to since.
Oh, I know.
But again, this was Strachan's team. They found a way to do what they needed to do.
They did.
They were never fancied, were they, really, Terry? You look back at that Strachan team and I almost kind of scratch my head and think, how the heck did this team get to the Champions League last 16 twice? And Martin O'Neill's team, which we all rave about, and most fans are fonder memories of, if we're being honest, that they can even get out into the last 16. Though, granted, I know he was a bit unlucky, O'Neill, as well in some ways. But I mean, if you were to put the two teams up against each other, you would think Martin O'Neill's team would have smashed Strachan's team. Although with the way they were managed, you wouldn't even be overly shocked if Strachan managed to scrape like a 1-0 if the two teams played each other.
Yeah.
It was just bizarre.
And again, against the whole backdrop of downsizing.
I know, it's so impressive.
What had actually happened, Jonathan, is Martin O'Neill's team would win until 8-9 minutes to go, and then Stephen McManus would probably score and would find a last-minute winner. Strachan's team would score a last-minute winner because that was a bog-standard Strachan performance. That's usually how they done it. They just found a way with minutes to go.
I watched them as a penalty or something as well.
Yeah.
Just to make sure of it.
Just for good measure. But this Champions League, this is interesting, guys. This is a question I want to put to you as well, because we've obviously got a Champions League group stage draw coming up in a few weeks. What an exciting thought that is. So we go into this one, 7-1. The group has a familiar feel to it because we get drawn against a lot of teams that we played in recent years at that point. AC Milan, who were the reigning champions, we'd only played a few years before in the 04-05 group stage, and we played them en route to them winning the Champions League the year before. So we've played them twice at that point. Shakhtar Donetsk, we met in the 04-05 group stage as well. And Benfica were in our group in this season, who we'd played in the group stage literally the season before. Now, in recent years, we have drawn Barcelona quite a lot, for instance. And especially now, with the amount of times we've not qualified for the Champions League in the last decade or so, sometimes you will see some fans out there that are just like, oh, Barcelona again. Oh, I wanted Real Madrid. Can beggars really be choosers, Terry? I'll come to you first on this one, because to me, I could kind of see, okay, maybe you do what's your team, but we need to just be happy to just be there in this opportunity we've got. And I don't think we've got time for the whole, oh, I can't believe we've drawn AC Milan again. It's like, come on, guys, how many times we've not qualified? Because, yeah, the Champions League, you will sometimes find that a lot of teams just seem to be drawn to each other all the time.
It's just draws in general. I mean, teams just tend to draw each other. I suppose in the Champions League, it does tend to be the same teams that are in there year on year, and in the qualifiers, it does tend to be the same teams that are trying to qualify. There was a few years there where we couldn't stop playing Rosenborg, and the reason for that is because they're in the same situation as us. We're both trying to get into the Champions League through the same way. I think there was one season we got Rosenborg in two different competitions. Recently, we've had the Hungarian team, but yeah. Barcelona, we just seem to be magnetized to Barcelona. So it wouldn't surprise me one bit if that was to happen again this time round. But do you know what? It's just so good to be back in it. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who we get. Yes, I can't believe how often we keep getting the same teams, and I would love to see us against other teams, but we'll take what we can get at this stage.
Totally. Jonathan, I think there's actually a chance that I can't remember the seeds off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure, because we're in pot 4 obviously, Fixture, AC Milan are a pot 1 team this year, Barcelona are a pot 2 team, and I think Benfica and Shakhtar are both in pot 3. Could you just imagine if that happened to us, Jonathan? Could you just imagine it, mate?
I mean, the stars are probably written. It probably will. Let's be honest with you. To kind of touch back on it when you were talking about the group stage draws back then, I remember being fed up to the back teeth of playing Barcelona. But I think at that point, in fairness, it was just more because I was used to Celtic getting there on a bit more of a regular basis, because we weren't too bad for qualifying in the noughties and even into the early 2010s. We got in a fair few times, and we were just like, why do we keep drawing these teams? I really wanted to play Real Madrid. I always have wanted to get Madrid at some point, but it does always seem to be Barcelona that gets pulled out of the hat, and it seems to have built up quite a relationship with them. But yeah, I mean, what Terry's kind of saying now, when you have so many years where you're not qualifying, you're just so happy to be in it. You'll take whatever the draw throws up and be grateful. If it throws up the same teams that we get any other time that we've been in, then who cares? We're in it for once, and the future of Scottish football is looking a lot more promising, that we can be in it a lot more regularly and hopefully starting to compete again like we were back then, because we're almost looking back at these games, with that nostalgia, and you're almost kind of looking at it as if these are things that just don't happen anymore. But it's going to be happening this season, guys, and we need to be prepared for it, and I think we're going to give it a right good shot.
I've got a sneaky feeling we're going to get an English team. No, there's every chance with the amount of English teams there is in it, but I just have a feeling. I've got a sneaky feeling for Chelsea. Don't know why.
Oh, okay. I'd probably be quite interesting, although I think our neighbours across the city would love us to draw them, because I think a few of them would blag some tickets to the away end at Celtic Park for that night. But the team that I really want to avoid...
Chelsea fans for a bit of trouble, Phil.
Oh, yeah, well, that's true. That's true. They are always those pesky Chelsea fans up to no good. I'm sure they'll be getting the blame again. But I just have this vision, because again, I always think that Scottish fan mentality, all the bad stuff always seems to happen to us. I keep looking at pot 3 and going, why are Shakhtar Donetsk even in this competition? Their country's literally a war zone right now. I know they've not played in Donetsk since 2014. They've been playing out of Kiev. But you just know the Celtic are going to end up drawing them, having to fly to the Ukraine for an away game in the middle of a war. Surely that must be getting played on neutral ground. Has to be. There's no way that UEFA could allow that to happen.
Are they going to play from Poland or something?
Is that what they're going to do? That's not too bad.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think that's what the national team's doing. Are they not? They're playing out I think it's Poland as well for games that they've had to play. So I would imagine if the situation doesn't improve by then, which is not looking like it will, then surely they aren't going to get through in Ukraine, because player safety and fan safety and everything else has to come first there. So that'll absolutely get moved.
Liam Collo says they're going to play their games at Legia Warsaw, so that's a bit better then. So, but anyway, speaking of Shakhtar, funny enough, because I say they're in our group in this one as well, a team that we were already familiar with at that point. We start off with a game against them, a trip to the Ukraine, and we couldn't really get off to a worse start. I remember quite vividly here that Steve McManus was having a shocker at the back, but we were 2-0 down inside the first 10 minutes. That oil money bought forward line of Brandal and Lucarelli were terrorised us. We were 2-0 down pretty much early on. It was like, oh God, we're going to get absolutely humiliated here. We're going to get trounced. But somehow it ended 2-0. We kept the score down, luckily. But that was a bit of a shock to the system. But again, typical Celtic away. Because up to that point, every time we'd been in the Champions League, we would lose all our away games and win all our home games. Because right away, second game, we're going in against the reigning champions, AC Milan. And we come away with a miraculous result, beating them 2-1 that night. Stephen McManus with the first goal midway through the half. And then, Kaká gets an equaliser from the penalty spot, but then absolute scenes, absolute carnage at the end. Gary Caldwell has a shot from the edge of the area. Dida can't hold on to it. Scott McDonald gets on the rebound and puts it away. Cue the mad scenes all around Celtic Park. A fan runs on the park, gives Dida a wee slap for his troubles on the way. I genuinely, though, see when Dida was down after that, and did he get stretchered off? Did he? He did.
He did.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
I genuinely feared that we were going to get tossed at the competition. I was like, we're in trouble here, because a fan shouldn't be going to the park. But when you do see the replays, you're like, he's absolutely made the most of that. He really has. I mean, like, to get stretchered off.
I think he got done for that as well. Yeah, he got done for over egging it.
Oh, but it was some moment. I say it was just a typical Strachan European force. We were, up against. We were punching well above our weight, and like I say, the reigning champions AC Milan, who had Kaká, Seedorf was in the midfield at that point. They had was Shevchenko still playing for the. He moved to Chelsea at that point. I know they had Gilardino. I know that he was in the team at that stage.
Maldini, he retired by then, Phil. Was he still kicking about?
I think Maldini retired at the end of the 07 season. I think his big sort of final hurrah was to lift the Champions League trophy in 07. I think that was the end for him. But man, Inzaghi would have been playing for them definitely. But yeah, it beat them. I say Scott McDonald, a Motherwell striker, just a few months before, bought for less than £1 million, pops up with the winner. But insane, because that was my first proper Champions League group game that I'd been to in person, and yeah, to see that happen was astounding. But the campaign continues, guys. We've got the double header. So obviously you play fixture 3 and fixture 4 against the same team. Reverse round, it was Benfica. So just like the season before, we played Benfica in the 2 middle fixtures in the group. We lost 3-0 out there and won 3-0 at home. And this season, we lost 1-0 out there and 1-0 at home in the second game. Aidan McGinlay scored the winner for us at Celtic Park. So after 4 games, we're on 6 points. It's a very familiar story. We've won both the home games. We've lost both the away games. But then you're thinking, could lightning strike twice again? Did when we played Shakhtar Donetsk in the return game. It's a game we've got to win to give ourselves any chance. We're 1-0 down after just a matter of minutes where Brandao scores again against us. And then John Kennedy went off injured in that game, I can remember. And I think this might have been John Kennedy's last playing appearance for us, because an aging Stephen Presley had to come off the bench to help us see out that game. But we're trailing 1-0 at that point, and then an unlikely goal hero just for half time, Yuri Jarosik, Jonathan, with an absolute rasper of a volley, absolute screamer of a half volley, just lets it bounce in front of him and laces it right in the top corner. Mate, that was amazing, wasn't it, that one? Yuri Jarosik, who'd kind of been out the team for a good while at that point, comes in from nowhere and does that. What a moment.
Hi, it was, and Jarosik's another one of those strange players that I don't have a lot of memories of. I remember when we signed him and thinking that's a big signing to have got in. He seemed like quite a big name to have managed to have attracted.
Was that from Chelsea? Did we get him from Chelsea?
Yeah, I believe we did get him from Chelsea. Yeah, and fair enough, he wasn't featuring for them, but still, Chelsea were a strong force in England, and at that time they'd won the Premiership a couple of times under Mourinho, just prior to Jarosik signed. It might have even been in the middle of them winning things down south. And I remember him coming in. To be honest, I don't remember him doing that much. I remember this goal, and I remember he's the one that's fouled when Nakamura scores the free kick against Man United the season before.
That's right.
So my 2 biggest memories of Jarosik are both European games, but domestically, I'm struggling to really remember him making a big impact. But maybe you guys might remember better than me what he actually did outside of that. That was that was like a wow moment when he scores this goal against Shakhtar. It was such a good hit. He just absolutely weathered it, as you say, right into the top corner, and then it sets it up perfectly for the second half, and it becomes typical Strachan, doesn't it, Terry, in the second half in this game?
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to Jarosik, my memory of him is he was very, very capable of scoring a goal like that. He had it in his locker, but he also had this sort of languid style that could sometimes look as if he was a wee bit lazy or disinterested. But he was a very, very, very underrated player. But like you've said, I don't remember too many moments. Certainly not on the scale of this one to drag us back into this game again. One that we had to win.
The only other thing I can think of just from doing my research on this one for this season was when I was talking earlier on about the start of the first half of the season. See that month of December where we were dropping points left, right and centre. He salvaged a draw for us against Hibs. Hibs were beating us 1-0 at Celtic Park. That David Murphy scored for them. The left back there at the time scored a great goal. Jarosik scored a quite late equaliser, but again, we were dropping points to everybody that season. But or that month, we were just all over the shop. But other than that, Jarosik's that was his only real 2 contributions in the end that season. That goal against Shakhtar, say a late equaliser against Hibs. But speaking of late, as I say, lightning couldn't strike twice, could it? Well, it actually did. And another player with a similar trajectory with Jarosik, when he started okay, but then kind of fell off a cliff. Now, keep in mind, the Natty had only signed that summer. He had an initial okay start, and then by the time this game rolls around, he's not even a first-team regular anymore. But it's getting late in the game. The crowd are getting restless. We need to win this game. You could feel the tension in the stadium. That point where every bad pass, the crowd are groans, getting on top of the players. but Aidan McGeady does a wee bit of magic out wide. He jinks out wide and passes that across the face of the 18-yard box. And Massimo Donati doesn't even get a clean connection on it, if I remember correctly.
No.
He kind of just sort of like bounces a wee bit, but it doesn't bounce in front of the keeper, but he just hits it just enough pace on it, and it flies into the back post. And again, absolute scenes erupt around the stadium. Celtic have snatched it again from nowhere, 2-1 up in stoppage time. Terry,
he was a very unlikely hero, Massimo Donati, as you say. He hadn't really featured. He came in, I think, for maybe around 3 million or something. I could be totally wrong on that. I think something like 3 million from AC Milan. Again, you're probably thinking this guy's coming in from the current European champions, Italian player, and you're maybe expecting too much from him too soon. But I do remember the ball falling to him, and I do remember thinking, I wish this had fallen to somebody else. And then, as you say, he hits it. He doesn't even get a clean contact on it. Nope. You're about to swear, and the next thing it's in the net. And again, it's just another one of those moments that kept coming up under Gordon Strachan.
So unlike the hero, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Just like the last person you'd have probably picked to have got a moment like that. Because I remember when Donati first came in, I was at one of his first games, even his home debut. I was at, they played Hearts, won 5-1 on my 15th birthday. Me and my brother went to the Celtic Hearts game, and Donati actually scored a hat-trick that day, which is crazy to think. He wasn't really renowned for goal scoring, but he definitely did. He scored a hat-trick that day. Celtic beat Hearts 5-1, I'm pretty sure. And he started off pretty strongly. And he did kind of fade a wee bit. And as I say, when you go back to it, you think that ball's coming out, you're thinking, oh Christ, just pass it a long one. And it kind of almost in some ways mirrors the AC Milan game earlier on against the campaign where it falls to Calder and you're thinking, why are you shooting? Please just pass this along. You have no right to be taking a shot on here, mate. Get that moved over. And then you're thinking, oh, for fuck's sake, he's going to have a shot. And then the Dida spills it and McDonald's there for the scraps. And it just seems like that was always perfectly written for Strachan to get these very unlikely heroes, these very unfancied players. And they always seem to pop up with big moments time after time. And that was always a huge moment. It must have been a great feeling being in the ground for that one, Phil.
Oh, it was absolute carnage. The AC Milan game was an experience, but you just think, surely no again. Only a matter of like a couple of months later, exact same scenario again. I'm like, I can't believe this, because the season before we had the Man United win and stuff like that, but I had to have my season tickets. So I was like, this is my first season, so I'm like, am I going to get these type of moments? Jesus Christ, I certainly did. I definitely got bang for my buck that season in the Champions League package. But yeah, people were just like falling over seats, celebrating, jumping into the rows in front. It was absolute turmoil, but it sets us up nicely. But again, it's a familiar story. We've now played 3 home games. We've won all 3. We've lost both our away games. We go into the last away game. We have to try and get something from Milan. If we don't, we need Benfica to do us a favour by getting a victory in Donetsk. Luckily, though, even though we lose 1-0, and we held on pretty long in that game before AC Milan got the breakthrough, but luckily Shakhtar Donetsk couldn't overcome Benfica. It was 2-1 to the Portuguese side, and that meant that we finished second and into the second round of the Champions League for another year. But the bubble was quickly burst, because in the draw we got our good old friends Barcelona. Terry, of course, is modelling tonight a Barcelona shirt from around about that era as well. But yeah, we had them in the second round. And I think I said this when I spoke to Dale, it's genuinely still one of the best European games I've been to, that one. Even though we lost the game on the night, it was still spectacular to watch that Barcelona team. And this is before they really hit peak under Pep Guardiola. It was Frank Rijkaard that was the manager at that time. But yeah, Jan Vennegoor Hesseling gave us the lead in the first leg before Messi got an equaliser. And then the most unlikeliest of heroes again, Barry Robson with an amazing looping header. One thing I always remember from watching those highlights back, if you ever see the start of the game when it's going along, the players and the Champions League anthems playing, the look on Barry Robson's face, he is every Celtic fan right now. He's like, a few weeks ago, he's playing for Dundee United at Tannadice every week. And now he's stepping out in a Champions League game against Barcelona. The smirk on his face when he's standing there, like, I can't believe, he genuinely cannot believe he's in that position. But Terry, before we came on, we were talking about it, but mate, that was a freaky goal. But you were at that game as well. Did you not mention to me that you were at this one?
I was at that one, and memories of that one is just a roller coaster of emotions. So you go ahead, the goal through Vinegar, and you start to think, oh my goodness, this couldn't happen. It couldn't happen, could it? Then they peg you back, and then you're thinking, that's us back to reality. Then you go ahead again, bit of a freak goal from Barry Robson, header up into the air. You expect the keeper to catch it. I don't know what he's doing, ends up in his net, and then you start to believe again. And then they just hit you. Gary Caldwell gives the ball away to Ronaldinho, who feeds it to Henry. Henry coming in from the left-hand side. You'd seen it so many times when he played for Arsenal. He cuts in from the left. He used the Celtic defender to sort of measure. He sent the ball outside him and bent it into the corner, as he did so many times in his career. I was behind the goals for that one, and it's one of those ones. You could hear the groan the minute Caldwell gave it away. And you just got that feeling when it went to Henry on the left touchline and you seen him starting to cut in, you just thought, this, you know what's going to happen here. Then you start to think, you know what, a draw in this game isn't a bad result. It keeps us in the tie. We haven't lost. This is a good Barcelona side. Yeah, it's not Pep's side, but it was a very, very strong team. And it was that strong a team that Xavi didn't actually start that night. There was a three in midfield of Yaya Touré, Deco, and Iniesta.
Still scary, that midfield three, but Xavi is special.
And then your front three is Ronaldinho, Messi, and Henry with Eto'o to come on from the bench. So it's not exactly substandard. No. And I just remember the feeling that night was disappointment, because I think you've been ahead twice, you come into the game and do you know what? You're thinking, if both teams play to their potential, we're not going to win this. But being ahead twice and being there and just that emotion, I remember sort of the ticket that I had. I wasn't near anybody that I travelled with. I wasn't near anybody that I knew. But it's one of those moments where you end up, you're jumping, you're hugging the guy next to you. You have no idea who he is. You're celebrating being ahead against one of the top sides, one of the top club sides in the world. And unfortunately, we just couldn't hang on. Messi did his bit, but thankfully, a few years later, we got our revenge on them.
We did. Now, Jonathan, you said before we came on as well, I think it's the Aidan McGeady interview that he did with Cy Ferry way back in Eld's open goal. He talked about that game where there was literally a point where he turns to Gordon Strachan at the bench and is like, what the fuck do I do? And Gordon Strachan's like, I don't know. You figure it out. Because they were just passing it around them.
Yeah, I think tactics kind of had to go out the window. They were just that good. They were just impossible to play against that night, to be fair. And I vaguely remember, as Terry said, being pretty disappointed that we actually lost that game at the time. I think, to be fair to us, I think when we were in Europe under Strachan and O'Neill, I think Barcelona might have been about the only team that beat us at Celtic Park between the two managers in the Champions League group stages. Parkhead was a totally different animal back then. It was pretty much a case there that if we lost, we were fucking raging. If we lost anyone, it didn't matter who it was coming. We fancied we'd take anyone on at Celtic Park and we'd give them a game. We'd either win it or we'd get something off them. We'd give them a bloody nose. Where it's never almost like, oh, it's good to be there. If we can keep the score down to maybe 1 or 2, then we've done okay. So
here's the thing, Jonathan, though. That team, look at that team of Gordon Strachan's. And the players that he had a base of Caldwell and McManus. That night, Lee Naylor was the left back. Paul Caddis was the right back. Wow. Paul Caddis that was our defence. That was our back four against Ronaldinho, Henry, and Messi, with their two still to come on. And we competed and we gave them a fright. And you look at the players that we have playing for the club now and in past seasons. And it's just very, very difficult to comprehend how we could do it then. And it wasn't a one-off. You know, this season wasn't a one-off. You had the Seville season, but regularly over those years, teams came to Celtic Park. You didn't care who it was. You expected a result. And more often than not, we were getting it. English teams coming up, we were beating them. And it's just very difficult to try and comprehend. There's been periods where we've had much better teams than this one, but this one was able to compete, and this one was able to do it.
I completely agree with you. It's exactly what I was actually going to go on and lead my point towards, was actually the fact that I think it seems like it's almost a mentality thing for me in some ways, because there's no doubt about it. For me, if you were to put the Celtic team of now under Postecoglou up against that Gordon Strachan team, player for player, you were to told, right, Terry, Phil, you've got to pick an 11, combined 11 between the two teams. How many of Gordon Strachan's players actually get in to Postecoglou's team, would you think?
Oh, it's not going to be many. The centre-backs, definitely not. Probably Boric over Hart would probably be one. I would say that's one. But, I mean, there you go. Terry saying the right-back on that game was Paul Caddis. No chance is he getting in over Ralston or Juranovic. It's like, Jesus. And our only other right-backs to that option, I would have brought Hinkle in by that point. But Mark Wilson was the only other right back, so it's just like, yeah, how did this team go toe-to-toe with Barca that night? And Terry's right, I came away for the ground that night genuinely like disappointed, even though it's Barcelona, and I'm like, oh, so gutted. I remember late on in the game, Samaras got himself in a good position and went down looking for a penalty when he could have really got a shot away, and it's like, oh, Georgie, come on, have a shot at goal. Could have salvaged the draw there. But I genuinely came away from the ground that night like, oh man, because we weren't used to losing at home. And you're right, Jonathan, Barcelona were the only team during that era that did come to Celtic Park and get a result. It was incredible.
It's Martin's team, and they did it to Strachan's team, and I think that was kind of one of those things. Was you actually came out the ground, or if you're watching at home, when the game finished, you were always pissed off when Celtic lost at home, and it didn't matter who they were playing. That sort of
totally.
Sometimes there's an argument put forward that the gulf, because of the money now, the gulf is too big. To me, the gulf is no bigger than that gulf when you look at our back four that night against that front three. Caddis, Caldwell, McManus, Naylor against Messi, Ronaldinho, Henry and Eto'o still to come on. I scribbled down the Celtic bench that night, and we look at the squad that we have now, and we talk about the depth in the squad. If Kyogo goes out, Giakoumakis comes in, we've got two players for most positions. The bench that night that I scribbled down, Mark Brown, Donati, Samaras, Darren O'Dea, Chris Killen and Evander Snow.
Wow. Killer's rule right there. Wow.
You're just thinking about it. Some of them probably got on. You're just thinking, honestly, imagine playing Chris Killen against like Barcelona. I mean, we're like having a hissy fit with the thought of like somebody like a Mikey Johnson or whatever playing in the Champions League. I can assure you, he's probably not far off a Chris Killen standard of player to have on the bench. So for me, it all goes down to mentality, and I think there's almost a defeatist attitude that we need to kick to the curb. When it comes to these sorts of games, because there's no doubt about it, I'm absolutely with Terry on this. That Celtic team was not a team on paper that, had lots of big names. I think I've seen the comments, as you say, it's like Boric and Nakamura were your two big hitters in that Celtic team. I think most people felt in that Strachan era felt the most affinity towards, and McGeady had his moments, as well, but the rest of it was fairly rugged. But they always found a way to get results, and I think for me, it always comes down to mentality, and they actually believed they could get a result, whereas I think a lot of the time we get so worked up on transfer fees now. We actually, just because there's a lot of money going about, particularly down south, it doesn't mean that the money's getting spent well. When 70-80 million pounds is getting spent on guys like Harry Maguire, I mean, Harry Maguire is absolute shite. I don't care what anyone says. But because there's a price tag put on players, we automatically think for some reason they're a lot better than they are, and because of the amount of money that's now getting pumped into the clubs, particularly in England, I think we sometimes just think, oh Christ, because they bought somebody, 10, 15 times the sort of money that we've spent on someone, and then that means they're going to be 10 to 15 times the player. Football doesn't work like that. And we need to kick that habit completely if we're going to make a go in the Champions League. And I think, to be fair, I think Postecoglou will do quite well in that sense of getting the players believing they can get results. But would you say it all kind of comes down to mentality, lads? Would you say it's more of that? Or what do you think is the big difference between Strachan's team and then even the Rodgers teams that were in the group stages and took a few hammer-ins? What do you think is the difference between those sort of results happening and not happening?
I think when it comes to the home games especially, I do think the dreaded T word has crept in a little bit, tourist element. We don't like it up here in Scotland. We always slag the English Premier League for the tourist mentality. But I think I mentioned it before on the show, there's the infamous selfie where Xavi, Iniesta and Messi are posing in the Celtic boardroom, trophy room with a Celtic shirt, for the social media and stuff like that. And I'm like, guys, you wouldn't see like Real Madrid going to Anfield for like a Champions League game and Benzema going down to Liverpool's trophy room to get a picture with a Liverpool shirt for like social media. It's like we're welcoming too much of that, and we need to get the ferociousness back at Celtic Park, because as it showed under O'Neill and under Strachan, it is our best weapon in European games. Away from home, it can always be a bit trickier, but see if we can get that crowd, the ferocious atmosphere, and teams are so deathly afraid. Look at the game we played against Rangers back in February. That was like a European game in the sort of mid-2000s. It was ferocious that night when they walked out in that park. Intimidating. You want these guys like to be walking out there. You don't want Messi or somebody posting a wee Instagram thing. Really enjoyed my game at Celtic Park tonight. Best atmosphere I've played in. No, you want to be tweeting things like, I was deadly scared out there tonight. Things like that. And I definitely think the atmosphere has been watered down at Celtic Park on European nights. Too many tourists are coming up to the games who just want to be there, to just be at Celtic Park. I think we need to get that back, and we can really scare a few teams, definitely.
I'm struggling to pinpoint the exact moment when we went from expecting to beat these teams at Celtic Park to not expecting to beat them. I'm struggling to pick what exact season did that happen in, or what game did that happen in? Where has that swing started to happen? And has it happened with a group of players? Has it happened with a particular manager? Or has it happened throughout the club? Are the fans part of this as well? Has the fans, the fans' expectations are probably now changed, but when did it change from we go into a game against AC Milan, the current European champions, and we expect to, at the very least, give them a game, and we turn around and beat them? If we were to draw the current European champions now and play them in 6 weeks' time, the expectation levels across the board are not that we would go and give them a game, and are not that we would potentially beat them. And somewhere along the line that has changed, and I just can't put my finger on when it happened. Or has it been gradual? It's been a few percentage swing each year, and you suddenly find yourself somewhere you go, how do we get here, kind of thing. It just I don't know, I'm trying to think of the right terminology. We've almost just fallen asleep somewhere along the line, and you've woke up, and now
Patrick McGinlay
we don't think we can do it. Yeah,
I've only got Patrick saying, he said it started when the board thought we'd arrived and beaten Barcelona 2012, but then obviously we got absolutely turned over by Juventus in the next round. But yeah, I don't know. I can't remember you on that one, Terry. I can't really pinpoint the moment. Has it been a mentality shift or whatever? But something's definitely different in European nights at Celtic Park, where it just doesn't feel like the mid-2000s, where, say, a Neil and Strachan's team, nobody was getting anything off of them. They were just like, they'll do whatever they have to get the result. But it's hopefully Ange can turn that around if it is a mentality thing. I do think Ange will drill into the players that you can do this. He will be very good with man management and stuff like that, make them believe. And maybe that might be enough in the end. That might just be all we need. Maybe a wee bit of luck as well, because some of the goals that we lose as well, I genuinely think, again, it's a will always be mentality, but you do look at some of them and go, only Celtic would lose that goal in Europe. It's the only time it can happen to us. But
I'm just hoping for some kind of spark, Phil. I don't know if being back in the top tier tournament will give us a bit of a spark. If that'll reignite the thing within the fans when that music starts to play. I mean, it's a special moment when the Champions League music starts to play. You start making noises that you didn't know you were capable of making, and nobody actually knows what noise they're making. But I'm just hoping that once that kicks in, that it reignites everything. In reality, we'll probably concede a goal in the first 2 minutes and everything will go flat. But sure, we can only hope.
Michael Ross has put it in here, and I think we're all thinking this. Sweeper keeper in Champions League scares me stupid. Yeah, that's what I don't want to happen. We kick off, and Joe Hart gets caught out in the first couple of minutes with a big lob up the park. Fingers crossed that doesn't happen.
That wouldn't surprise me if that happens at all in European football if Hearts pushed up. It's a certainty for me it's going to happen somewhere along the season. Let's hope it's not one of the European games that happens. But to kind of go back to the point in terms of where things started to go downhill, for me it was actually after the Juventus game under Lennon when he was the manager. It was the following season. I remember myself downsized massively for the next one, and it's part of the reason Neil Lennon ended up leaving the club, because he got no tools to do the job. And I think we're in a Champions League group, but I think we only beat Ajax possibly this season, and beat them 1-0. I think we might have lost all the other games in that group, and they just looked a shell of what Lennon had the season before, because his team had just been totally dismantled. And I think at that point we then just started to accept it. Obviously Lennon left, Celtic went on a downward trajectory really for a couple of years with Dyer. It never really happened for him Europe couldn't get us into the Champions League, and then even the Europa League runs for after the Inter Milan result was fairly impressive at home, drawing 3 each. But Inter Milan were nowhere near the same team that the likes of AC Milan or Barcelona were back in a way. And then you're kind of looking at it. Rodgers came in, and it was seen as a massive deal him even getting us through the qualifiers at that point. I remember he was a fist bumping away. It was Astana, I think it was, that we qualified in his first season. It was Astana.
Oh, it was the Israeli team Hapoel Beersheva, where Saidi Yanko had the shocker of a game. I was literally hiding behind the couch watching that game. It's like, don't ever put me through that again, Celtic. That was horrible.
5-2 at home, and then we lose 2-0 or something ridiculous away and almost go out. And Rodgers is like thumping the chest at the end. It's the most passionate I think he ever was. But the fact he knew he kind of got away with it a little bit. And I think that was the moment where we were just like, you know what, we're just happy to be in it. I mean, a guy like Brendan Rodgers is acting like that, just qualifying for the Champions League. You almost kind of feel like that's the level we've reached. But that was kind of where I kind of felt it all went downhill, was after Neil Lennon's getting Celtic to the Champions League last season with Juventus. And it's a typical example of Celtic not kicking on when they really should have, because they had money in the bank and they had an opportunity there to really go and back playing. And granted, I know the competition in Scotland wasn't as strong, with Rangers no longer being in the league at that time. I almost felt as if Celtic had just settled for winning domestic trophies and interested in Europe. And for me, that was when it all kind of went down the pan, if you like.
That's definitely a good sort of place to pinpoint. But in terms of our European campaign and this season we're talking about, that was over after Barcelona. They beat us 1-0 out in the new camp, and off we pop. But all in all, to get to the second round of the Champions League, it was a good day for the second year in a row as well. We couldn't really grumble, but we'll just quickly touch on mid-season transfers, because we were quite busy in that January window, and there would be one signing in particular that was massively, massively crucial. So Celtic went out and got Andreas Hinkel, badly the right back, because John Joe Perry-Doumbé got injured against AC Milan and was out for the season. And the only other option was either Paul Caddis or Mark Wilson, and Wilson had a sketchy injury record. So we went and got Hinkel. Koki Mizuno joined that summer window. Ben Hutchinson, remember him? He joined as well. But the two big ones that had a real significant impact in the title run-in was Georgios Samaras on loan from Manchester City, and of course,
Loan to buy, Phil.
Loan to buy, at the time, loan to buy.
We did those back in 2008.
Yeah, we did. And we brought in Barry Robson from Dundee United, who, as I say, will go on and have a crucial impact on the remainder of the season. And of course, our rivals over the City, they brought in Christian Daly, who would also cross paths with Barry Robson very soon in an Old Firm game. That's quite significant. Neil Alexander also came in, and they also brought in Stephen Davis on a loan, with a loan to buy option as well. Alan Hutton left Rangers that window, though, and equalled the Craig Gordon record. He went to Tottenham for £9 million. Now, the 07-08 season, as I said earlier on, is notorious for fixture congestion, carnage, absolute bedlam, because there was two teams at the forefront of this absolute madness during that season, and the two teams were Motherwell and Rangers. Motherwell, the reason why theirs was is their pitch was turning into a cabbage patch, essentially. It was falling apart. It was literally mud. Now, there's a few things that can contribute to that. Obviously, Motherwell aren't exactly flush with cash, so it's hard to maintain a good pitch across the season. But when you have to share a ground as well, their ground wasn't getting any breathing space every week, because Gretna couldn't play in their home ground because it didn't meet SPL standards. So they had to ground share with Motherwell for the majority of the season. But once Gretna, basically the shit hit the fan with them and they went to the wall near the end of the season, they began ground sharing with Livingston because it was a bit cheaper for them. But yeah, Motherwell's park is completely disintegrating by the time we go through the winter months. We've also at this point in time decided we're not going to have a winter break, because the winter break was originally brought in the early 2000s as a way to give football parks a wee bit of time to recover during the dead of the winter. But we got rid of the winter break for a spell during the sort of 2000s because fans obviously didn't particularly enjoy the football being off for 3 weeks. But Motherwell could have definitely done with it, because their pitch is just going to pot in the weather. Every time it was raining, it was just waterlogged. Games were just getting called off, and all the SPL and SFA could do as well, just put it in the back burner. Just put it in the back burner again. And this would go into games that are literally getting rescheduled 2-3 times. You're coming along to the game that's meant to have been played weeks ago, and it's like, we can't play it tonight either because the pitch is waterlogged. put it back again. And this would keep on going on. And of course, the other team that was at the forefront of this nonsense was Rangers as well, because Rangers went on a really good run. To their credit, they did get to the UEFA Cup final that season. Not playing the most attractive football. I believe Lionel Messi even deemed them to be anti-football after they drew 0-0 with Barcelona in Champions League group stages. But yeah, Walter Smith had no shame really in playing a quite turgid, stodgy way of football, getting by teams like Sporting Lisbon, Fiorentina, Werder Bremen along the way. But yeah, as Rangers progressed, obviously they would have midweek games that would then clash with a game that's been rearranged, and that would then get put back and so forth. But yeah, and then there was the watershed moment though, where they actually went to the SFA or the SPL, whichever governing body it was, and actually asked to have one of their own games against Gretna rearranged because they wanted to prepare more for their big European tie, something that we would have seen last season as well, but ends up setting a wee bit of precedent, stuff like that, because the SPL bowed to their whim. But guys, I'll come to you, Jonathan. See, when it comes to things like this, where you've got like a team like Motherwell, for instance, who can't maintain their park and so on, and this keeps happening, is there a point where the governing body needs to step in and say, see if you can't fulfil this fixture, we're either going to give the other team a victory or it's going to be a fine of some kind? Or was the answer just keep putting it back and putting it back? Because as we'll touch on very soon, that was going to cause its own problems because there's a deadline to the season as well. And yeah, we're heading towards it.
I mean, it's an interesting one. I always kind of look at it and you do think, well, clubs should be maintaining their own pitch. I think it's been proven that scrapping the winter break was a terrible move just because we know when we're going to be getting the worst weather in Scotland, it's going to be December, January time. So it makes sense to actually just give the players as well that rest and also give the pitches that sort of time as well, where the groundsmen can work on them for a few weeks where needed to make sure they're up to standard. I don't think I would have really been going too hard on Motherwell that particular season because they were ground sharing with Gretna, and then you can really turn around and say they've got two teams really on their pitch, which is a bit unfortunate in terms of trying to maintain it. And I think they may have had rugby on there as well, Motherwell, previously at some point. They sometimes have the Glasgow Warriors or somebody sometimes play it there. I think I'm not overly familiar with the rugby teams, but I think they have had rugby on it previously, you know, as well. But there's definitely a case to be made that, you know, if games are getting played and I don't think if they weren't, you know, sharing the ground with others, then I absolutely believe they should be keeping their pitch in good order and they should be having the games played. Yeah. I think the SPL is trying to do the right thing and trying to move the games back because you know what the uproar is going to be like. This is Scottish football. About Phil, you know, if you turn around and start giving the points to the opposition, there's going to be all sorts of hearsay. I mean, could you imagine, for example, if we were in a position where Rangers were due to go to Motherwell and then the game gets just called because the pitch isn't in a good enough state? Rangers get 3-0, and then we go tomorrow a couple of weeks later, but the pitch is back in good condition. We'd turn around and screaming for it. You know, we'd be screaming that that's a sort of conspiracy and all sorts. Yeah. But it'll be interesting, Terry. I mean, from your point of view, how do you kind of see that? Do you kind of see that?
I think you need to be very careful what you wish for, because if you start bringing in sanctions like that, what are all these teams going to do? What are they going to do? Plastic pitch.
Oh yeah, that's true.
They're going to go for the plastic pitch. You're going to end up with 6-8 of those a season if you start bringing in sanctions like that. Motherwell, I think, Phil, we touched on it earlier. Did they have 2 games postponed over the period when Phil O'Donnell passed away as well? That kind of contributed to their.
That was one that I think so. See, there's all sorts of stories with this because we copped a wee bit of blame, but it's mostly from our pals over the other side of the city saying that we manipulated the system and used the Phil O'Donnell death to get that Old Firm game called off because we were in an injury crisis and we were going to lose the game and stuff like that. And it's like
same as we did with COVID.
Yeah, same as we did with COVID. Yeah, I know.
That was last season.
It's all Scott Brown's fault.
Aye, pretty much. So I can't remember exactly what Motherwell's situation was, but yeah, as I say, when they go into from the January to May run, there's so many games that just get called off. But yeah, it's a lot of it's to do with they've had the ground share with Gretna for most of the season. So when Motherwell are playing an away game, the pitch isn't getting a break because Gretna were playing a home game on it, so it just fell to pieces. Luckily now Motherwell have actually got one of the better playing surfaces in Scotland. They've really, maintained it very well. I think that season was a watershed moment for them. But yeah, they were at the forefront. I say Rangers as well with their UEFA Cup run going on and on and on. Yeah, so many games were just getting rearranged and so forth.
Yeah, I think on the Rangers side of things, I mean, they obviously knew the deadlines for the season. They obviously knew there was a Euros. It was a Euros, wasn't it, coming up in the summer?
There's a Euros coming up. Yeah.
I mean, they asked for a game to be moved. That game was moved. As you say, did they then think, right, well, because that happened then, anytime we ask for this, we'll get it kind of thing. But and if I remember rightly, the season was extended. I mean, the league ended up playing out on a Thursday night or something, didn't it? Which would have been unprecedented as well.
Sure did.
So I think it had to be finished. And if you played any longer, you were potentially going to have players who were due to play in the Euros that wouldn't have been able to play in the Euros because we were still kicking about trying to finish SPL games. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because the original finish date for that season was going to be the weekend of the 17th and 18th of May. That was to be the finishing date because, yeah, this is something that never ever gets brought up because this one still sticks in the Rangers fans' craw to this day. Now, don't get me wrong, there was one wee bit where Celtic can take a bit of the blame. Peter Lawwell definitely manipulated the system by going on about a tour of Japan that we've got arranged in the summer, which realistically, the season being extended a bit wouldn't really affect it because we would have played that pre-season tour after the Euros had finished anyway. The Euros wasn't going to get moved. So it does feel like we did manipulate it a wee bit. I think Peter Lawwell did put a bit of pressure on them, but that's something that never gets brought up though. UEFA and FIFA have got rules about when there is a tournament in the summer, all domestic leagues that are affected have to be wrapped up by, I think it's a 2-week window before it kicks off so that all the squads that are taking part can obviously get together at their training camps and stuff like that, get all together. Because had it been extended significantly, which is what Rangers wanted, we would have lost Vennegoor Hesselink, who got called up to the Dutch squad, Samaras, who would get called up to the Greek squad, and Artur Boric, who got called up to the Poland squad for the Euros. That's 3 very crucial players in that run-in that we would have lost to go and obviously be up with international teams. So they couldn't have been extended more than what really the SPL did. They can only extend it by a matter of days to make sure it all get finished in time within the 2-week window that they've got to give for UEFA for the European Championships. Because, as I say, originally the season's meant to end on the 17th, 18th, but it's such a farce that all the final games of the season for each team are all over the place because Gretna and Hearts, they play Fixture 38, which is the final game of their season, on the 13th of May. Inverness played St Mirren and Killie played Falkirk on the 17th of May. Meanwhile, the top 6 all had to finish their season on the 22nd of May, which was the Thursday following that weekend. It's all over the shop. But again, it's just a result of so many games getting put back and put back. And this is what happens. You just had like a bottleneck built up. So I believe the European Championships were kicking off on the 7th of June. And the final for the Scottish Cup final, which is the game that brings down the sort of cutting on the season, was on the 24th of May, which literally was 2 weeks before the Euro started. So we were right on the deadline essentially for it. But yeah, it was all over the shop. And I say it's just, as you say, Jonathan, the SPL are trying to do the right thing by putting things back, but eventually got to a point where they're like, this isn't going to make it for the deadline, so they had to do something. But the best they literally could do was 4 days. But as I've said as well, another thing that never ever gets brought up is, Rangers fans can go on and on about, they didn't have enough time to play these games. It was unfair on them. But they have got like youth players and stuff that Walter Smith could have called upon to freshen his team up. You're trying to tell me that some of those players couldn't have came in to get some results against like St Mirren and stuff like that. So to me, there's a wee bit of blame on their side as well, where it's like, well, you could say maybe the SPL forced you to play I think it was like 3 games in 11 days at one point they had to play. But it's like, well, you've got more than just like 11 starters and 5 or 6 subs. You've got a few more players. And to me, Walter Smith didn't really, freshen up. But again, that's their problem. We're not here to dwell on their woes, but it is interesting that they seem to have a blind spot and it's all big bad Celtic's fault and the SPL and Peter Lawwell again, manipulating the system. And it's like, no, I think you need to look at yourself a wee bit here as well. You kind of blew it yourself.
Yeah, no, definitely. I just it's madness when you consider it. They had a few draws, I'm pretty sure, even the Scottish Cup, didn't they? Which a few replays.
Yep.
Fixture congestion started before they changed the rules back, so it was just extra time and penalties. I know I don't know why they bothered with replays. I was never a big fan of that rule anyway. But you're looking at it, and Rangers were fortunate in some ways, even got the extension. And they've asked for games to be moved earlier on. The SFA would have been well within the rights to say, well, that's when the fixture is, and you've got to play it then. It happens in other leagues. We've seen it happen when Celtic arranged for them playing European teams, that the other leagues have shown no mercy to our opposition, have made them play on a Sunday, and then they've had to go again on the Wednesday or whatever. So it's not unheard of, and particularly when you've got the backlog coming in. And I guess this is where the SFA probably needed to maybe be a bit firmer and just not move that game. Was they knew that the Motherwell games weren't getting played at all. They knew that pitch was just not in any condition to be getting games played. They knew they were going to probably have to pile these up more and more towards April, May time. So they had that opportunity really to move them. So it does come into the thinking. But you're right. They do have a full squad there, Rangers. This isn't a St Mirren or somebody who could have been crippled with those sort of games and wouldn't have anyone really to fall back on. Rangers are a big club. They've got a big squad. They didn't seem to want to utilise it. Walter Smith, I don't think, would have made many changes throughout that season. It was pretty much a fit starting 11 and bench. I don't think he was really the type to tinker with his team too much, and that was probably Rangers' downfall, would you say, Terry?
Yes, but I also think there's a road, a school of thought that you can kind of get sucked into here, that Rangers were hard done to, Rangers were unlucky, Rangers threw this league away. I'd prefer to look at the other side of it. Celtic went into that spell, last 7 games, nothing less than 7 wins would do. There was a game against Motherwell at Celtic Park, and I remember that day we got beat 1-0. It was 8 games to go. This game was at home. We got beat 1-0, and I just remember walking out of the stadium, and certainly the section that I was in, every single person was singing the same chant, and the chant was Strachan, get to fuck. And it felt like the whole stadium was singing it. Obviously you can only hear what's around you, but it was unanimous. It was every single person pounding down those steps. It was Strachan, get to fuck. And I don't think there was one person walking out of that stadium that day that felt Gordon Strachan and that Celtic team could go and win the last 7 games.
Yeah, well, that's teed up very nicely, because that's the final segment of the show, the miracle run-in, Terry. And yeah, you're totally right about that game.
Trying to fast forward you on here. I want to get them a bed.
I remember being at that. I remember the Strachan chants. I remember it at the time, because in amongst all this congestion carnage that's going on, Celtic's grip on the title is starting to fade away. It's the last 2 months of the season. So in March we had a bit of a blip again, similar to the December month. We were dropping points. We had a 0-0 draw with Dundee United in the middle of the month at Celtic Park, and we ended it just going into April. We lost 1-0 to Rangers at Ibrox, and then they say the aforementioned Motherwell game where they beat us. So multiple journalists the next day are quick to write us off, Tom English, Hugh Keevans, all the usual suspects. And to be fair, looking at the bigger picture, you can understand the logic, because it looked insurmountable at that point, because after the defeat tomorrow, Celtic were sitting on 68 points, having played 31. Rangers were on 74 points, having played 29. So we got 2 games in hand at that point as well. And also during March as well, our grip on the Scottish Cup has also relented. We've lost to Aberdeen as well in a replay at Celtic Park. So at that point, we're out the League Cup, we've been knocked out of Europe, we've now lost in the Scottish Cup, and we're dead and buried in the league. This is a disaster. We are finishing with nothing this season. All Celtic can do is get 7 games left at that point, and all they can do is hope. Just go out, try and win. 2 of the games are against Rangers at Celtic Park due to the fixture congestion. The New Year game will now be played on the 16th of April, but you get 2 home games. You just need to win the 7 games, beat Rangers twice along the way, and just hope that some of the other dross in the SPL can do us a favour, which, is a dangerous game to play. But incredibly, the first little glimmer of light comes just literally after we've lost to Motherwell. A day later, Rangers travel to Tannadice and draw 3 each with Dundee United. Dundee United are always good for getting a result against Rangers every season. As bad as Dundee United can be sometimes, they seem to be a bit of a bogey team for them. But yeah, Rangers can only draw 3-3. So that means that Rangers are now 7 points in front with just a game in hand. And along the way as well, I think a Scott Brown suspension would present an interesting opportunity for Barry Robson, and him and Paul Hartley would come in and become the centre mid pairing, which would be crucial going into this run-in. So I've got it all written here. And this took me a while to write this one down because I was like, right, I had both sets of fixtures side by side on Wikipedia and going, right, at this point, we were that many points behind. I've sat and worked all out. So here we go, play by play, blow by blow. This is how the title race went that season. So the fixture congestion obviously reared its ugly head. At one point during this run-in, Rangers will have 4 games in hand on us. 4. That's how bad it will get because of the fixture pile-up. But hey, in the words, as I've said here, there's a famous Celtic fan, Eddie Reader, it's got to be perfect. And lucky for Celtic, it was perfect. No room for error here. So Celtic's next game, they finally get a backlogged game against Motherwell played that's been put off a couple of times. We go to Fir Park and beat them 4-1 on April the 13th. Rangers didn't play that weekend in the league, so Celtic have now closed the gap to 4 points, but Rangers still have 2 games in hand. The next league game that both teams would play would be against each other. It is a crucial game. It's what I said on my Celtic story to Dale was my favourite Celtic Rangers game that I've been to. It is the one we beat them on the 16th of April 2008. The 2-1 game, Nakamura scores an absolute wonder goal from 30 yards out, and then Jan Vennegoor Hesselink scores. And as Ian Crocker said, Vennegoor Hesselink answers the Celtic SOS, save our season, because they are still in the title race. That was his exact words, still etched in my mind to this day. Absolute carnage in the stands when that one went in, and plus the fact it was a nighttime game just added to it. It had everything, that game. But as a result of winning that game, Celtic have now got the gap down to 1 point, but Rangers still have 2 games in hand. But Celtic again play next in the league because Rangers still aren't playing league games. Again, it could be Scottish Cup replays or whatever is causing it. But Celtic go on and defeat Aberdeen 1-0 on the 19th of April. Georgios Samaras scores. Celtic are now 2 points in front, with Rangers now having 3 games in hand. But then the next meeting is another Celtic Rangers game. It is a highly charged one. It's a 3-2 victory for Celtic at Celtic Park on the 27th of April. Scott McDonald scores a brace, and Barry Robson with that iconic penalty where he just blasts it down the middle. Kirk Broadfoot very clumsily pulls down Scott McDonald. How Kirk Broadfoot didn't get a red card for that as well is beyond me, because McDonald is right on goal. Kirk Broadfoot literally just wrestles him to the ground, pulls him down.
Tackles I've ever seen, Phil.
It's a rugby tackle. It's actually
back, and McDonald's extremely clever on that, because you can see him coming and he actually just stops. He's just like, you know what, you're going to bundle into the back of me. I'm going to get a penalty here. I doesn't even have to think about it. McDonald just stops, and Broadfoot just takes the invitation to pretty much yank him to the ground. I mean, Kirk Broadfoot's one of the worst players I think I've ever seen.
Terrible.
I don't know how he got so many games for Rangers, but that's another story. But Scott McDonald just had him played like a fiddle.
It's got to be a blatant one for us to get it, like, doesn't it?
There's no way it couldn't have been, but I don't know how he never got a red card. Stevie Whittaker did get sent off in that game, but one thing I remember about that game as well is we were 2-1 down at one point in it. Davy Weir and Daniel Kuzan scored for Rangers, but I used to sit down in like the second row in block 138, and I think it's when Davy Weir scores the equaliser, and it's just like the worst lineup of Rangers players came over right to that corner in front of us celebrating. Weir, Ferguson, Davis, Broadfoot, the anger in their faces, like, get it up, and you're just like, what a horrible bunch. So we beat them that day. It's the Barry Robson penalty. He actually runs down to the corner where I was sat celebrating, but the just, you felt the momentum shift at that point. You really did begin to believe that, by the way, we could do this here. This might actually happen. But yeah, Robson just stepped up. No mistakes. Don't try to be fancy or nothing. I'm just going to blast this right down the middle. Absolutely smashes it in. And we're going to go on and win the game 3-2. So at that point...
Just before you move on, was this when Ferguson ended up spitting the dummy at the end? Was that the 2-1 game he spat the dummy, Barry Ferguson? The
2-1 game, the fight at the end of the 2-1 game, but it started for Nacho Novo and Aidan McGeady. Of course, Nacho Novo was involved, of course. Novo and McGeady got into a scrap, and then it just escalated for there. It was one of those games where there's no handshakes at the end between the players, or a good game. No. It was one of the Celtic Rangers games that ends with, I think Boric might have had Davy Weir by the throat at the end, or Gary Caldwell or somebody. Because there's definitely an image somewhere of Davy Weir with a Celtic player with a hand around his throat. I think it's either Caldwell or Boric has got him. I think it's that game. But, oh man, Yeah,
I think that's the point where I started thinking it's turning, because you could tell, even though that they had such a big lead at that point, they totally lost their heads when Venegar Hesselink scored in the last minute of that game. Whereas, if they'd been able to keep their composure, but you could almost tell they were thinking, oh fuck, we didn't want to be this team that ends up. They can almost see what's going to happen before it even happens. They're thinking, we're going to be this team that had this big lead and we're going to end up losing it to our rivals and we're never going to hear the end of it. And you can almost see the fear in Ferguson's sort of mindset when he decides he's going to have a go for McManus, because he just knows, fuck, this title race isn't over at this point. And it reminded me of that when you were talking about the game there.
Oh, it was definitely one of the ones. And as I say, with Celtic winning that 3-2 game now, the gap is now Celtic are 5 points in front at the top of the table, but Rangers crucially have got 3 games in hand at this point. Celtic are next to play again, because for some reason Rangers just are not playing league games, and Celtic go to Fir Park again on the 3rd of May and win 2-1. Motherwell went a goal up in this game, and Scott McDonald equalised right away before Georges Samanas got the winner quite late on at a corner. So Celtic are now 8 points in front, but Rangers have got 4 games in hand. Was it not? It wasn't a corner. Was it not a corner originally, or was it?
Yeah, it was like a goal kick. I'm pretty sure, because Rangers fans still have a go about this to this day as well.
Of course they have. Of course. They're still raging about the one we got at Livingston last season. Remember, we beat Livy at Almondvale for the first time in ages, and we got a corner that wasn't a corner. They still bring that one up as well, so it doesn't surprise me that they're still annoyed with that. They remember all these wee things. But yeah, we ended up winning that game. So I say we're now a whopping 8 points in front. I say Rangers have got a whopping 4 games in hand. But then another chink of light comes out of nowhere, because the next day they finally play a league game. Rangers, they finally got a league game to play. They go Easter Road and they can only draw 0-0. So the gap is now 7 points, but Rangers have 3 games in hand. But now you're starting to sit up and go, wait a minute, that's a couple, because Rangers have now not won a league game in the last 4. Even though they've not played that many, and they've had European games and Scottish Cup games, but the black and white of it is the last 4 league games, they've lost twice to us. They've drew with Dundee United, they've drew with Hibs. So it's like, oh, wait a minute here, by the way, they are starting to crumble. But then we go from there, as Rangers do finally get a victory in one of these games in hand. They get a 1-0 victory over Motherwell at Ibrox to cut the gap to 4 points with 2 games in hand. But then we have a watershed moment, and I think you two guys will remember this. Dundee United go to Ibrox and lose 3-1, and the game is synonymous for Craig Levein has had enough of Mike McCurry's shit, because on the sideline, he absolutely loses it. There is a goal that I believe is it De Vries, the big striker for Dundee United, scores a goal that deflects off of Davy Weir's heel and goes into the net, but Noel Hunt was standing in an offside position, but wasn't interfering with play. He wasn't in the goalkeeper's line of sight, and he got flagged offside. It got to the point where you could hear Craig Levein actually shouting over the Ibrox crowd at Mike McCurry, going, Mike! And Mike McCurry comes over, sends him to the stand. And after the game, Craig Levein did not hold back. He went to town on him and was like, there's no point in us even coming to Glasgow. You get nothing, absolutely nothing. And funny enough now, Mike McCurry, people can say, oh, Celtic fans, you're paranoid. Mike McCurry does the after-dinner speaking circuit on Rangers events nowadays. Makes you think, doesn't it?
But it's one of those ones that they need to, when it comes to referees, they need to declare their allegiances. For me, they just standard. It's par for the course in England, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be done in Scotland, as well. But I do remember the game you're talking about, and the offside goal that's not given is one of the worst decisions I think you'll ever see in a football ground. It's just so bad. It clearly hits David Weir. No Hunt's nowhere even near him. Really, I remember watching at the time and thinking, what the fuck's going on with this? And then I think there's a few other incidents in that game where he just had a man sent off. I think it was just Daniel Kuzan maybe tries a headbutt at one point. The Dundee United boy stays up. And then there's another penalty appeal as well from Dundee United in that game that's not awarded either, which looks suspiciously like a penalty too. So they definitely got the rub of the green in that game, shall we say, Rangers.
They did, but as a result of winning that game 3-1 on the 10th of May, they've now reduced the gap to 1 point with a game in hand. Celtic play the next day, though, against Hibs, and this is our second last league game. We beat them 2-0 on the 11th of May, which means we're going into the last game. We're on 86 points. We've extended the gap to 4 points. Rangers have 2 games in hand, which they will now play in the mini extension that the SPL have created. So it's a case of if they get 6 points out of the 2 games in hand, they will go in on the final day ahead of us. But we need either St Mirren or Motherwell to do us a favour. And Motherwell again step up and get a 1-1 draw with Rangers. They then beat St Mirren 3-0 on a Monday night. They played on a Saturday, then played on a Monday, 2 days apart. But it now sets up the scenario where both teams are going in on the last day, 22nd of May, Thursday night. Both of them on 86 points, which just did not seem even feasible a few months before, given where Celtic were. But here we are. So Celtic will be travelling to Tannadice, and Rangers will travel to Pittodrie. But a couple of things that did happen, though, in amongst all this madness, is Rangers lost the UEFA Cup final during that run-in as well to Zenit St. Petersburg. And Celtic legend Tommy Burns passed away. Now, if you believe in omens as well, at that point, the last time Celtic had won the league at Tannadice was in 1981, and one Tommy Burns scored the winning goal that day. So the omens were good, and he had the number 10 on the back of his shirt that day as well. So on his shorts, rather, not on the back of his shirt, because Celtic players didn't wear them in the back of the shirt, but he was number 10, and that would be quite significant as well. But just quickly, if we could find the words to sum up Tommy Burns as a man, as a Celtic man, guys, because, yeah, this hit me hard as well. I went down to Celtic Park when it was announced, and, there was shirts laid out, flowers, the lot, and it was like, I took a shirt down and laid it down. But, yeah, that was a big one, that, because he is Mr. Celtic for me. He is everything. He talks about how he was just a fan that got lucky. He's just so humble. He epitomises everything that's great about the club. But yeah, it was a sad day when Tommy Burns passed. Very, very sad day.
I'm pretty much the same as you, Phil. For me, Tommy Burns is my favourite Celt of all time. I was lucky enough to see him as a player for a couple of years, but I don't really remember him that much as a player. His period as a manager was... It's one of the periods that really sticks in my mind. I just absolutely loved the guy. I just thought he had so much class. Just the way he spoke about Celtic, no matter what was happening or what way things were going, he was just such a genuine class guy, and you just knew that he absolutely loved the club. And even though his time as manager wasn't the most successful, it's still a period that I absolutely enjoyed watching the team because of the way players that he brought in, the way he let them go and express themselves. I just loved listening to him, his press conferences, his interviews. You just knew you had somebody in there who absolutely loved the club as much as you. And it was such a sad time. What I would say was when Tommy had passed away, I mean, it wasn't unexpected because he had been missing in the dugout for a period. Then there was rumours that he hadn't been well. Then even after all that, he did come back and he did get involved again after he'd had his diagnosis and things like that. But when Tommy had passed that week before, I was just in no doubt that with that having happened, there was no way we weren't going to go on and win that league. There was no way that group of players were going to pass that up. It then just gave us an extra cause to go and do this. And although moving on to the game, there's plenty of nervous moments. I just always had that in my head. We're gonna do this for Tommy, no matter what it takes.
Definitely. Jonathan, what's your memories?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel it's like one of those sort of fairy tales that was kind of around for Celtic once that happened, that you kind of knew Celtic were going to go on and finish the job off. Tommy Burns kind of passed me by as a manager. I was too young to really appreciate him as a manager. At that point, I wasn't really old enough to really be following the football. So most of my sort of stuff comes from my dad and my brother. And, he always comes across extremely well. I think it speaks volumes for a guy like Tommy Burns because he's one of the few players and managers that's played for Celtic or indeed Rangers that actually is able to cross the divide and has the respect of both sets of fans. You don't see that happen with very many players, and I think that speaks great volumes for how much he was liked as a person. And I think, to be fair, anytime you hear any interviews with anyone that's had any dealings with Tommy Burns, almost all of them crack a smile, and you can almost see them light up and have something really exciting to tell you about the man. So I think he always seemed to have time for everyone. He came across as a total gentleman from what I did see of him as a coach at Celtic. And certainly, he had the respect of all the players as well. And he's just, it's so sad that he didn't get longer in his life because he was taken far too young.
Very, very funny guy as well. And even when you watch some of the the documentaries and programs now since his passing, even sort of memories of people who were close to him at the club, his family and things like that. There's so much laughter because they're just recalling things that he said or things that he did. And he must have been a great deal of fun to be around. And I think he was a great help to a lot of the young lads that came through the ranks at Celtic over the years. I think he was someone I think the key word that Jono used there is respect. He had the respect of absolutely everybody, be it the kids coming through at the club, be it the players, be it the opposition, be it your greatest rivals. Everybody just loved the guy.
Without a doubt, when you listen to Aidan McGeady's interview with did the open goal side, he talks about he had many times early in his career he would have many disagreements with Gordon Strachan. It was Tommy Burns had to pull him aside and just calm him down and always, brought him back down to earth, and reminded him what it meant to represent the club. But truly great man. It was a sad moment. But you're right, Terry, there was no way we weren't going in and losing this game. This was definitely all set up now. So yeah, it's a really highly charged night. It's a Thursday night game, very unusual. It's the 22nd of May. It's 3 years to the day after Helicopter Sunday, which we won't be talking about. No, we will just close with that one. Interesting fact though, my dad's birthday is actually the 22nd of May, so it was a nice wee birthday present for him, this one, that we got the job done. So yeah, we're going to Tannadice. They're going up to Pittodrie on the final day. It's 0-0 at half-time in both games, but quite early in the second half, Paul Hartley whips in a perfect corner and big JV of H. Jan Venner of Hesselink heads it in. I say number 10 on his back. That was Tommy Burns' number. The night we won the league at Tannadice in 81, Tommy was wearing number 10. And then news filters through not long after that Aberdeen have taken the lead at Pittodrie, because I can remember watching the game live, and it's one of those moments where the Celtic fans in the Dundee United end as well, like just anyone that could get a ticket anywhere. And obviously the cameras are looking across to the stand, and it's the Dundee United fans. But you see some fans begin jumping up and celebrating, and you can hear a roar around the stadium, and it's like, that's got to be a goal for Aberdeen. Of course, then the score update comes up, Aberdeen were a goal up. And then, of course, we get news as well that Aberdeen then went 2 up, and that was it. It was beyond doubt. And it was at that stage they actually showed on the TV footage, the Satanta cameras showed the helicopter flying towards Tannadice, because they wanted to go for that angle again, try and recreate the old helicopter drama. But in the end, it wasn't like 3 years before when it went down to the very last minute. We pretty much had it wrapped up like midway through the second half, because Rangers had fell apart, so much so that even the wee rat himself, Nacho Novo, gets sent off as well. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Bless him, eh?
Bless him.
I mean, you're looking back at that, and you're looking at it from who Rangers had to play. You could not have got a more perfect fixture for them to have from a Celtic point of view.
Yeah.
If you could have cherry picked any team for them to have to go to and win, you would pick Pittodrie probably every single day of the week and twice on a Sunday. Aberdeen just have no time for them. The hatred between the two clubs is unreal. And Aberdeen were always going to be doing everything they possibly could to make sure there was no title celebration up at Pittodrie if we could get the job done at Tannadice. So you always kind of felt there was that bit of insurance. I wasn't overly surprised, by the way, Phil, that Rangers didn't win that game up at Aberdeen. My housemate, he's a big Aberdeen fan, and it was just like, no fucking way is this going to happen. We're not going to fucking let this happen. And then you're going back to obviously as we got our job done. It was a bit nervy. I remember our game in the first half, but we found a way. We persevered. We kept going at it. I don't remember us really having too many scares. It wasn't really like the other last days of the season we'd had in recent years under Martin O'Neill, where things didn't quite go the way we planned. But this time around, I can't really think, Terry, of Dundee United ever really having a moment where we're thinking, fuck, this might not happen.
No, I don't think so. But there's just that little bit of nervousness. You've got one eye on the other game. You're always expecting something to come through that's not going your way, and it's kind of just, when are we going to get the breakthrough here? When's it going to happen? And thankfully, it happened whenever it did.
It did indeed. So we'll quickly just move on to wrap up, because the full-time whistle goes. Gordon Strachan has won 3 in a row. Celebrations were fantastic. Even when they go back to Celtic Park, there were thousands waiting for them outside the ground as well to celebrate, because as a Thursday night game, bit of an awkward one to end on. But obviously the celebrations were mostly all around Tommy Burns, the dedication to him. It was a phenomenal moment, and it is a very fondly remembered one. Which brings me to the final word, really sort of summing up the season, because we've seen, especially I think in the last decade during the Rangers debacle, where they've been down wallowing in the lower leagues, where we've had these seasons where under Lennon it happened twice. We've only won the league title and didn't win any of the domestic cups, and it feels like it's very bare minimum, you know. But this season in particular, when you sum it up, we did decent in Europe. We punched above our weight there, so that's a tick. That's a plus point. We had a weak defence of the Scottish Cup. We went out early in the League Cup, 2 home defeats as well to teams in the SPL that we should be beating. So the Cup stuff, you could probably put a red X next to them. But this title win, I say, even though that was all we won at the end of the season, this one is special. This one just lives long in the memory because of probably the nature of how it was achieved. Because I say 2 months beforehand, you're like, there's no way we're winning this, and how we done it. So it begs the question, and this is something that gets debated still to this day. And I think you touched on it earlier on, Terry, and I actually agree with you, because we had to do our bit. Because people will say, did Celtic win this title, or did Rangers lose this title, or was it really a bit of both? But at the end of the day, you've got to win the games. At the end of the day, that's the hard part. So I would say that it's more a Celtic won this title than Rangers threw it away, because they had plenty of opportunities to see out, as I touched on earlier. They have a full squad. They have the players there to get by teams like Motherwell and Hibs and stuff like that. You're telling me they couldn't have brought in 3 or 4 players from the reserve team to just freshen it up a bit? And it's like, to me, I think they shot themselves in the foot there. And I think, you know, people who are saying that it's actually more Rangers lost this title aren't giving Celtic the credit they deserve, because they had to rally in that last 2 months. And the team spirit that they showed, the way they pulled it all together, for me, it's a defining, it's a Celtic victory rather than a Rangers loss this season, without a doubt. What about you, Terry? Would you?
There's no saying, Phil. The league table never lies, and you don't win the league in October or January or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You win it in May. We both played the same amount of games. Although if you listen to people, you think that they had to play like an extra 20 games. We both played the same amount of games. We talked earlier about some of our rocky games. Some of the games, the game against Gretna where we scored late on, those are the games. They're all worth 3 points at the end of the day. They're all worth the exact same. It doesn't matter if that game happens in October, December, or the last game of the season. Every game counts as much as the next. For me, it's a Celtic win. Yeah. Did I think it was going to happen when I walked out of Celtic Park that day and we were so far behind? No, definitely not. No. But if we hadn't won those last 7 games, we wouldn't have won it. So for me, it's a win. And what I would say is, looking ahead to this season that we're coming into, and I know that this is one that's been discussed on the bus previously, if you were to be offered to win the league title this season and get through to the last 16 of the Champions League, would you take that, and would you think that was a good season? And you absolutely would all day long.
100%, man.
Definitely, Terry. I think you'd absolutely have to say that. And, you know, even just looking back on it, you know, you look at how Celtic performed over the course of that season, and as you rightly say, the league table doesn't lie. Rangers fans can kick and moan as much as they want about how things went out. From their point of view, but it was not Celtic's fault. The Rangers had a good European run.
Yeah.
Good teams the first time around in the Scottish Cup. That's on them. It's not Celtic's fault that Rangers decided they were only going to play the same starting 11. That was nothing to do with them. That was their own decision. You know, Celtic had poor results throughout the season, but at the end of the day, they were able to pick up more points than their opposition, and the best team always wins the league table. And that was proven by the end of that particular season. It was quite funny, just to kind of go off on one just after the last day of the season. I was actually right in the middle of high school at this time, and I actually ended up having a geography exam. I think it was actually the Friday morning right after it. And one of the questions the little devil whoever put this in there, that someone managed to pre-plan this. These questions must have been sent months in advance, but it was absolutely hilarious. They ended up with a question in this geography exam about the weather temperature at Pataudry when Aberdeen Rangers. Just couldn't write it. I mean, I think every Celtic fan that was in that exam hall was grinning like a Cheshire cat when they see the question popping up, and it's something that I still remember to this day. But it was a very memorable season, and it all played out particularly well. And when you consider the run-in that Celtic had to put together those results, there's no doubt about it. Celtic were the best team that season. I mean, Terry, obviously you were mentioning there that you were not really expecting it. You know, after the Motherwell game, I don't think anyone really was. Would you say that was the most unexpected title win that you've seen as a Celtic fan?
From where we were With 7 games to go, I'd have to say, yeah, absolutely. There's been other title wins that perhaps going into the season, I maybe didn't expect them, but as the season played out, then, we won them. But yeah, that was one that was gone. It was gone. And somehow this group of players, as we've said so many times, found a way to turn it around.
Definitely did. So that sums up the 07-08 season. Now, Terry, you've done well hanging in there, mate, but I just need you for another couple more minutes. We've got a trivia question.
You work away.
You're not getting away just yet. You're not getting away.
You're grand. I've been thinking about this the whole time. I've been scribbling. I've been scribbling.
I've also mentioned a couple of players along the way.
Yes,
I don't know if
indeed.
you picked up on them. Okay. So let me just scroll back to the start of my notes. So I'd said that Jan Vennegoor Hesselink scored the goal that won us the title. Let me just count, make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Did I say 8 at the start? Because he's one of 10 and it's 9. Of course, I can't bloody. I wear glasses as well, and I keep miscounting. So there's 9 other Dutch players. He's the 10th one, basically. So there's 9 others. So we'll do it, as I say, we'll do it a penalty shootout style. So one of you goes first. If he gets it right, move on until there's a last man standing. So turn off your comments as well, because people are probably putting them in the comments right now.
Many have you got, Jono? Many have you got?
I have only got about 4 or 5. I've actually forgot about this question. I kind of forgot it, and then I've kind of forgotten who I even thought. It's past my bedtime now, to be honest with you.
The brain.
I was thinking 2 hours ago.
Come on.
You switched the brain on then for the last couple of minutes. Okay, John, we'll go to you first then, mate. We'll just start with you. So give me one.
I'll give you the obvious one. I'll get Van Hooijdonk out of the way. Nice.
Yeah, Van Hooijdonk is correct. Yes.
I'll go just as obvious then, Virgil van Dijk.
Yes, that is correct.
I'll go Glenn Loovens.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one, mate. Well played.
I'll see your Glenn Loovens and I'll raise you Dirk Boerichter.
Oh, that is very good.
Dirk Boerichter, yes.
I'll raise you Dirk Boerichter, and I'll give you the player that's the only Dutch player I would imagine that's played in a World Cup final that's also played for Celtic, and I'll give you Edson Braafheid.
Edson Braafheid, yes, indeed.
And I will re-raise you with Evander Snow.
Van Snow, who I mentioned earlier on, gave away a clumsy penalty at Ibrox that season. Yes, he did.
That's right, he did, didn't he?
Okay, there are 3 left. There are 3. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty.
I think I've got another one, actually. Goalkeeper, Doris de Vries.
Doris de Vries, yes, indeed. Terry, down to 2 left, mate. It's a 50-50.
Juice Højveld.
Oh, well played, mate. I thought that was the one that nobody would get. So that means that the one that's left, I don't think it's that difficult, John. If I don't think that makes it more pressure for you.
I'm struggling with this last one, like.
Ooh.
You know it, Terry?
No.
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 You can pass and then we can go to Terry. If he passes, we'll see if the comments have got
Well, yeah.
I don't have it.
I've got no clue who the last one is.
You'll kick yourself. Let me see if anyone in the comments has got it. Well, Patrick McLaughlin, he is a resident trivia buff like me, and he's gave all the answers, and it's in there. Can you spot which one you didn't get?
Bobby
Petr.
Yes, so obvious.
Bobby Petr is the other one. So yeah, that does wrap up the 2007-2008 season. We've just hit 2.5 hours, which is sort of standard running time for Bustalgia. Let's be honest. We may not be doing tournaments now, but here we are. We still managed to go 2.5 hours. So yeah, guys, if that's all we need to do. So let's see. This is Wednesday. So tomorrow night it's the First Night Forum. The TNF. It'll be Russell. And it will be Connor and David will be on for the TNF. Friday night, I don't know if we've got anything penciled in for Friday yet, do we?
Predictor League show.
Predictor League, yes, that's right.
Through the grapevine, which I think all 3 of us will need to give predictions for as well in the old group chat beforehand. So we'll need to have a wee think about that. I think me and Del gave ours for the Celtic game on Monday, but someone to have in our back pockets. I think all the contributors on the bus are going to be running a league this season to see who knows the most about Scottish football, which should be interesting.
Indeed. And then Sunday, something quite big coming up on Sunday. Celtic will be kicking off the league campaign, unfurling the flag against Aberdeen. And then there's a small matter of the Boise Bus live at the Bullfrog in Motherwell, 8 p.m, 8:30-ish sort of start. So yeah, if you're there about 8-ish, if you're coming along, then yeah, you can enjoy all the fun and frolics of a live Boise Bus. There'll be post-match pitch. There will be a double-down quiz and a Q&A at the end. So, yeah, it's a busy week coming up for the bus as well. Oh, by the way, as well, I've just seen that Russell Boyce came in and said that Frimpong's also an answer. Do you know where I got my answers from? the Celtic Wiki, the actual Celtic Wiki, the actual proper website, there's a bit that says players by nationality. So I clicked on it and scrolled down to Netherlands, and they don't have Edson Braafheid listed, and they don't have Jeremy Frimpong listed, but they do have Jos Højbjerg listed. So whoever maintains the Celtic Wiki, we need to get that updated.
With the answers.
I know. Celtic Wiki can get the answers. But anyway, on that bombshell, guys, we will head off. So thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Terry, for coming on tonight. And next week, Bustalgia, Celtic Years Episode 2, it will be the Celtic Da podcast, which we're going back to the early 90s. The early 90s, the Biscuit Tinman time. So we're going to go back and look at that. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. But anyway, guys, we shall run the end credits, listen to Chris Sutton's dulcet tones. And again, thanks everybody for watching.
Cheers, Phil. Thank you. See you, Jono.
Some of his comments about me deliberately trying to cause controversy. Well, I work in the media now. And you've got someone sitting there next to you who's an embarrassment to the media profession. He's an apologist. He's a charlatan.